Chapter 301. Master of a Mortal Mansion. Cheng Yu subconsciously realized that he had been a little overconfident. He recalled an old saying, "Villains die from talking too much." For some reason, after seeing Feng Xing use 2 supreme spells in a row, Cheng Yu had a vague feeling that death was about to come. Cheng Yu had never expected immortal Shi Pai to actually do so many things before his death. Not only had he left the snake scales and intrinsic spirit field to Feng Xing, he had even passed on the White Knight spell. The most frightening thing was that Feng Xing had even learned the immortal mode. These 2 spells hadn't been created by the same person, but they were extremely compatible, and when used together, the 2 spells worked like a perpetual motion machine. The armor of the White Knight spell was originally created by condensing the spirit energy of heaven and earth. As long as there was spirit energy, the armor wouldn't be destroyed. The most monstrous thing was that this Dao spell completely ignored the terrain and wasn't restricted by the intrinsic spirit field at all. Using the immortal mode as a foundation for this spell ensured that the spirit energy would circulate endlessly. In a sense, it was like a perpetual motion machine, which would increase one's battle strength dramatically. The White Knight spell was immortal Shi Pai's famous technique, which had shocked the world for a while, but very few people had seen him use it with their own eyes. Now that Feng Xing had inherited this spell and was using it again, Cheng Yu was truly amazed. Furthermore, there was one thing that Cheng Yu hadn't expected. When the White Knight spell switched between the 2 forms of armor, it would actually change gender at the same time. At that moment, Feng Xing stood in the intrinsic spirit field, her slender body motionless as she stared fixedly in front of her. She was like the embodiment of darkness. Her entire body was shrouded in a black light that resembled a chaotic mist. Even her hair was dyed jet black, and her exquisite face looked as if it had been carved from jade. Even if this kind of demeanor couldn't be considered unparalleled, it was at the very least unparalleled among her peers. This was how Feng Xing should have been. "I thought I didn't need to use this move to deal with you." Feng Xing raised her head and spoke in a girl's voice, which was a little callous. "Impudent. I'll get rid of you right now." The master of a mortal mansion, Cheng Yu, raised his hand, and in a flash, hundreds of spirit swords shot out. Now that the situation had completely reversed, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Cheng Yu could totally imagine how powerful the White Knight spell and immortal mode were. In fact, he was even stronger than he had imagined. He could feel Feng Xing's aura skyrocketing. Hundreds of spirit swords bombarded her body with a metallic clang, but they couldn't penetrate the dark triumph armor, which had been strengthened by the 2 spells. She was like a black swan in a sea of swords as she swam proudly. Finally, without the aid of any magic treasures, he soared into the sky. True immortal. Cheng Yu's expression finally changed drastically. He had not expected that the boost from the 2 techniques would be so great for Feng Xing. He had reached the level of a true immortal, and was now able to fly through the air with his own strength. Under the dual effects of dark victory mode and immortal mode, not only did the surface of his body form a dark armor, even his aura had reached an extremely terrifying level. Hundreds of spirit swords chased after Feng Xing, but Feng Xing's aura shook in midair, and the formation of the spirit swords was instantly scattered. In the end, Cheng Yu actually saw her stretch out her hand to directly intercept several of the spirit swords chasing after her, and she crushed them in her hand. Then, this master of a mortal mansion couldn't help clutching his chest as he fought back the blood that was surging out of him. Every spirit sword in the intrinsic spirit field had a contract with him. Once they were damaged, they would suffer a punitive backlash that would return to him. After Feng Xing crushed more than 10 spirit swords in a row, Cheng Yu felt as if his chest was in a sea of fire, and his internal organs were about to melt on the spot. Although he didn't vomit blood on the spot, he was in so much pain that he wished he were dead. It was as if he had to suffer in silence. However, this insignificant pain only lasted for a moment. He gritted his teeth as his hatred for Feng Xing soared. No matter what, he was going to kill Feng Xing in this battle today. He raised his hand to recall the spirit swords, and all the attacking spirit swords flew back behind him to line up like sardines. Cheng Yu knew that these spirit swords weren't enough to contend with Feng Xing, who was supported by 2 super spells. If they continued fighting, all he would do was break a few more of his treasured spirit swords. Furthermore, he would suffer a continuous backlash, which was very disadvantageous to him. You're not going to continue? Fang Xing smiled as a young girl. But unlike the sunny smile of a teenager, there was a hint of wickedness in her smile, which made Chengyu feel uneasy. My friend's spirit sword is still with you, right? When will it return it? Fang Xing asked as she stared at him. All the spirit swords in the world will submit to me. So your friend's spirit sword will be mine sooner or later, said Chengyu. Fang Xing frowned. At that moment, she only had one thought in her mind, and that was to strangle this Chinibu to death as soon as possible. Standing in the air, Chengyu smiled sinisterly. That wooden sword is very special. I'm willing to call the sword spirit inside the sword the most powerful sword spirit I've ever seen. The only pity is that the blade is too weak, and it doesn't have a scabbard. This kind of sword isn't perfect enough. I'm thinking of a way to make it perfect. Floating in the air, Fang Xing's eyes narrowed. What did you do to Lord Jinka? So he's called Jinka? I'm looking for an outstanding smith to refine his sword spirit body and fuse it with the peerless godly sword I forged. Chengyu laughed cruelly. Also, you actually call him Lord? That's too ridiculous. Since ancient times, the sword spirits of spirit swords have only served cultivators. They can't be called living beings at all. They're just tools. Fang Xing frowned deeply. She begged to differ. He was suppressed by my spirit-subduing flags and trapped in my magic treasure. After coming to my immortal mansion, I added a new sealing formula to the spirit-subduing flags, and even used the holy array pattern. I've cut off his connection with the original owner for the time being, Chengyu said, so there's no way he can escape. As for now, I want you to see my unfinished masterpiece. As he spoke, Chengyu waved his hand, and a green longsword broke through the top of an iceberg and flew into his hand like a shooting star. Chapter 302. This is the heavenly materials sword I'm proud of. Chengyu's eyes finally revealed his confidence as he gripped the green sword. Facing him, Fang Xing was also startled by the sword chi in the sword. She felt that it was very special, and there was something strange about it that she couldn't put into words. Very quickly, Fang Xing realized what was strange about it. It was hollow and didn't have a sword spirit at all. It didn't have a sword spirit, but it could be said to be a top-notch spirit sword in terms of material and workmanship. This was the first time Fang Xing had seen a spirit sword without a sword spirit. This is the perfect empty shell I've created, but it lacks a soul. Chengyu raised his fingers and slowly slid them over the blade. Sword chi followed the movement of his fingers and burst forth with an astonishing aura, as massive spirit power surged forth like a tide. Fang Xing was shocked. With the White Knight spell and immortal mode, she had just barely reached the level of a true immortal, and she could clearly sense the nomological power surging through the sword. This was actually a nomological sword. Staring at the sword, and recalling what Master of Immortal Mansion, Chengyu had said about the familiar, Fang Xing suddenly thought of something. If that was really the case, then this familiar really could be said to be the most tragic one in history. After doing so much for its master, it had been forced to commit suicide in the end. To be able to become a familiar, it had to have been a big shot in ancient times. Anyone who had died in such a tragic way would have been too ashamed to face their descendants and elders. Apart from its immense power, the most important thing about this heavenly materials sword is that it has been infused with the nomological power of recovery, so it's indestructible. Chengyu opened his hand and let the spirit sword float in his palm. If one looked closely, they would see that the hilt of the sword was actually studded with diamonds. This was something Chengyu had deliberately left out. Otherwise he would have thought it a little too ostentatious. His heavenly materials sword had taken 100 years just to make the hilt, and the diamonds on the hilt had all been certified by experts in South Africa. Every single one of them was a real diamond. 8 stars, 8 arrows. This sword of mine has never been bathed in blood since it was forged. Today, I'll use your blood as a sacrifice. Chengyu sneered. He was majestic and intimidating. However, when he spoke, he had a Chinibu tone that no one knew from which novel he had learned it. Of course, The heavenly materials sword in Chungyu's hand was indeed a huge deterrent. At the very least, Fang Xing's expression was no longer as relaxed as before. Go! Manipulating the heavenly materials sword, he turned it into a streak of green light that approached from afar, then became blurry and invisible. The speed of this sword far exceeded Fang Xing's expectations, and was on a completely different level from the hundreds of spirit swords that had appeared before. In the air, Fang Xing's aura swelled again as it rose to another level. Previously, she had held back and purposely did not release all of her power. But now, in her maiden state, Fang Xing felt a strong sense of threat from this sword. She tried her best to catch it with her eyes. In the first round of attacks, the heavenly materials sword had turned into a sword light that almost brushed past her snow-white earlobe, sweeping away a few inches of her black hair. In the face of this sword, the aura barrier created by 2 super spells was completely useless. Don't run. Even if you break your legs and scream your lungs out, no one will come to save you. Floating in the air, Chungyu manipulated the heavenly materials sword to chase after the girl. Fang Xing cursed inwardly. Although her defense was impregnable, she was in someone else's intrinsic spirit field. Although the immortal mode and the white knight spell were 2 super spells with perpetual motion, they weren't completely devoid of energy. If she couldn't find a way to break through, it was very likely that she would die of exhaustion in the end. The immortal mode consumed far more physical strength than spirit energy. Thus, as she dodged the heavenly materials sword, Fang Xing was also looking for a way to break it. Her hands formed a lotus seal, and in the blink of an eye, dozens of magic seals appeared in front of her, condensing and then shattering like fireworks. A moment later, the scales that had been firmly embedded in the dark armor unexpectedly turned into 10 shadow daggers that surrounded the heavenly materials sword. The dark armor created by the white knight spell couldn't only be used for defense, but also as a last resort to attack. It was also a major weakness of the white knight spell, because once the scales on the armor turned into shadow daggers for attack, the overall defense would be greatly reduced. But Fang Xing could also see that Chungyu wasn't able to use the other spirit swords as he pleased while controlling the heavenly materials sword. The reason for this was very simple. The heavenly materials sword didn't have a sword spirit. Without the support of a sword spirit contract, it would be difficult to maintain such a high degree of precision control by relying solely on the magic treasure contract. Thus, when Chungyu took out the heavenly materials sword, it was tantamount to giving up on using the intrinsic spirit field. Right now, the intrinsic spirit field was the same as an unbreakable barrier that was used to trap Fang Xing. Thus, in this situation, sacrificing some defense and using the dark armor's shadow daggers to slow down the heavenly materials sword's advance, then waiting for an opportunity to attack its owner. This was the best method the girl could think of. But in the next moment, to the girl's astonished gaze, the heavenly materials sword actually split into 2. One of them tangled with the 10 shadow daggers, while the other stabbed directly at her with unstoppable destructive sword chi. She had been tricked. Fang Xing clenched her teeth. She hadn't expected Chungyu to have actually calculated to this extent. He had deliberately made her sacrifice the dark armor's defense in order to expose a flaw in her originally impregnable defense. Fang Xing's expression changed. The sword had directly pierced her right collarbone and nailed her to the glacier in the distance. Blood flowed down the wound, and drops of blood fell on the ice like blood lotuses before freezing into blood ice. Fang Xing coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood. After being hit by the heavenly materials sword, she had been shaken to her core. Looking inside her jade mansion, she realized that the sword chi had actually borrowed the circulation of spirit energy produced by the white knight spell and immortal mode to penetrate deep into her meridians and wreak havoc. She was now in a dilemma. If she allowed the 2 super spells to continue, the sword chi would slowly wear down her insides. The only solution was to undo the 2 spells at the same time. But then she would lose the ability to fight. Fang Xing knelt on the ice and gritted her teeth as she painfully undid the 2 spells. The dark light lingering around him completely dissipated, and he returned to his youthful appearance. The corners of his mouth and chest were stained with blood, which trickled down the corners of his mouth. In the end, you're still too young. You're still lacking in wisdom to avenge your father. In the air, Cheng Yu's smug laughter rang out. To him, everything was already over. He laughed sinisterly as he stared at Fang Xing. Since you've let me have my fun, I'll grant you one last sword strike. But just as he said this, the space in front of Fang Xing actually split open, and a child in brown clothes and a white robe slowly walked out. He didn't make a move, but merely gave him a meaningful look. In the air, the heavenly materials sword that had been about to stab Fang Xing directly changed direction halfway. Chapter 303. 15 minutes ago, when Wang Ling and the others arrived at Glittering Jewel's pavilion, they realized that Fang Xing wasn't there, and that the Taoist in red who had landed earlier had disappeared. An intrinsic spirit field. After sensing the surrounding environment, the silver unicorn immediately made its own inference. The intrinsic spirit field has a special magnetic field that can only be sensed by someone who also has an intrinsic spirit field. There's no mistake. After Immortal Toya's treatment feast, coupled with the silver unicorn's extremely strong self-healing ability, it was able to walk again in a short period of time. The narrow-eyed girl was still sleeping on its back. So, the red-robed Taoist who flipped the roof of this palace wasn't an illusion? Dharmaraja asked. When they had rushed here earlier, they had sensed the aura of battle from a distance on the flat roof of Yuntai Pavilion. At that time, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had been the first to see a Taoist in red blow up the roof of a heavenly palace in the distance. At that time, the red-clothed Taoist's flustered and exasperated expression was exactly the same as the emoji on the internet. Asterisk 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 asterisk. That person is the master of Immortal Mansion, Cheng Yu. The silver unicorn narrowed its eyes. But I didn't expect him to also have an intrinsic spirit field. At this point, the silver unicorn suddenly felt a little sad. It required a cultivator's accumulation of spiritual energy over a long period of time. Without sufficient spiritual energy, everything else was just empty talk. In order to develop an intrinsic spirit field, it had gone through a long period of cultivation. But now the establishment of intrinsic spirit fields was as easy as opening a vegetable market. Even an itinerant immortal could do it. It was a little unscientific. In the Glittering Jewel's pavilion, a group of people sat on the ground. The roof of the palace that had been destroyed by the red-clothed Taoist was being repaired at a speed visible to the naked eye under the effect of the restoration law. Wang Ling sat cross-legged on the ground and opened his heavenly eye. He exerted his heavenly eye to the extreme, and his gaze focused on the void. Finally, the image of the intrinsic spirit field was projected, and it was completely projected in the void. The silver unicorn was so shocked that its hair stood on end. It turned out that the third eye could actually see inside the intrinsic spirit field. How come it didn't know about this? Looking at the silver unicorn's shocked expression, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal couldn't help laughing. Brother Ling's heavenly eye is very special. It can pierce through the void. That's what we often call seeing through appearances to see the essence. This might be a bit complicated to explain. You know about radio, right? The silver unicorn. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Brother Ling's heavenly eye is like a radio that can adjust the frequency. Next to him, Immortal Toya hurriedly chimed in. So this is actually normal for Senior Ling. Sit down. Don't be too surprised. If it wasn't for the sacred beast's image as an idol, the silver unicorn would have cursed out loud. It seriously suspected that it had been living in a dog's stomach for the past 8,000 years. As expected of his master, he was indeed powerful. The scene changed, and everyone saw the scene inside the intrinsic spirit field. The Taoist in red was engaged in a fierce battle with a young girl. Everyone was astonished at this scene. Dharmaraja, Fatty Luo and the others all had their mouths agape. They saw that even Ling Jimren's paralyzed expression had turned into one of deep thought. This is his brother Fang Xing? How did he suddenly turn into such a cute little girl? Dharmaraja sucked in a cold breath. It turned out that the strongest cross-dressing big shot among them was here. In the image projected by the heavenly eye, at that moment, the girl Fang Xing was using the combined power of two super spells to fight against hundreds of spirit swords on her own, and she even had the upper hand. It was a ghastly sight, and at the same time, it was the first time that everyone had seen Fang Xing in this form. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal frowned. I never knew Brother Fang Xing had this side to him. But what on earth is going on? He was a little confused. The little brother he had known for several years had suddenly become a little sister. This wasn't just a visual shock, but also a spiritual one. This is indeed Brother Fang Xing. Salian Jinren was very knowledgeable. Also, this is probably the White Knight spell, which made Immortal Shipai famous back then. Coupled with Immortal Jinyuan's famous immortal mode back then, this is the effect of the combination of these two super spells. Gazing at the image, the silver unicorn couldn't help shivering. It finally knew why these three core female elders of Immortal Mansion had suddenly died. The girl in the image was strong enough. With the support of these two super spells, she had just barely reached true immortal level. Even 10 itinerant immortals might not necessarily be able to deal with a true immortal. Furthermore, the silver unicorn could sense the power of the intrinsic spirit field from this girl. It was very clear that she was also someone with an intrinsic spirit field. It was likely that before she had fought the Master of Immortal Mansion, she had already used the intrinsic spirit field to deal with the three elders of Immortal Mansion. And while the intrinsic spirit field was on cooldown, the Master of Immortal Mansion had dragged her into the next battle. Even if the silver unicorn hadn't said anything, most of the people here had already guessed this. Gazing at the image, Silian Jinren sighed. Senior Immortal said before that Brother Fang Xing had been fostered since he was young, and I've been trying to figure out his background all this time. Now it seems that he really isn't a simple person. He is Immortal Shipai's posthumous son, and looking at his current situation, he should have inherited some of Immortal Shipai's core strength. A lot of people here turned pale with shock at this deduction. If that's the case, then everything makes sense. Speaking up to this point, Salian Jinren sighed deeply. She knew a lot about what had happened back then. Back then, a lot of media outlets believed that Immortal Shipai had been instigated to go astray. Now, it seems that the instigator was this Master of Immortal Mansion. When all was said and done, this was a long-standing grudge between the Master of Immortal Mansion and Fang Xing. It was just that this time, Fang Xing had taken this opportunity to completely explode. At that moment, the initially silent silver unicorn suddenly cried out in alarm. When it saw Chengyu, the Master of Immortal Mansion, take out his heavenly material sword, its pupils instantly contracted. I've seen this sword before. It's a spirit sword that the Master of Immortal Mansion spent 100 years to create. It's very strange. I'm afraid your friend is in danger. Wang Ling looked up at the image in front of him and gazed calmly at Fang Xing in her maiden form. Wang Ling didn't think he had been involved in the various crimes that Immortal Shipai had committed back then, and the only things he knew about them were from old antiques history lessons. In fact, he wasn't qualified to judge anything at all. Wang Ling didn't say he liked Fang Xing, but he didn't say he hated her either. As for her sticking to him, Wang Ling felt that it was probably an ill-fated relationship that he had accidentally offended when he had killed Loopy Toad back then. Thus, staring at the image, Wang Ling heaved a long sigh in his heart. This ill-fated relationship could only be slowly settled in the future. No matter what happened in the future, right now Fang Xing was still his brother. Brother Ling, do you have a way? Brother Fang Xing, he can't hold on much longer. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal shouted anxiously. At that moment, Fang Xing had already ended his two-stage spell, and was gradually reverting to his youthful appearance. The silver unicorn's eyes narrowed deeply. If we want to save him, we have to break the intrinsic spirit field. But that's too difficult. It's not difficult at all. Fatty Luo became excited. Lord Jinka can definitely do it. This is Ling Jinren's spirit sword. Master's spirit sword. The silver unicorn was blank for a moment. It's the Peachwood spirit sword that the Master of Immortal Mansion took away a while ago, Fatty Luo explained. The silver unicorn was suddenly enlightened. But I remember, the Master of Immortal Mansion has already sealed that sword heavily. Hearing this, the corners of Wang Ling's mouth couldn't help twitching. You want to seal Jinka with that kind of broken seal? Hey Young. Chapter 304. Brown sword light poured out of the dark space tunnel and illuminated the entire glacier of the spirit field. It could be said that Jinka's appearance was completely beyond Chengyu and Fangxing's expectations, because logically speaking, it was impossible to open up a space inside an intrinsic spirit field. This was just a sword spirit. Master of a mortal mansion. Chengyu's eyes widened, his face full of disbelief. He had clearly already sealed this sword spirit. The layers of seals were so thick that even ghosts and gods shouldn't be able to escape. Under their astonished gazes, Jinka walked out of the brown light. He was still wearing the same white robe and brown robe, and still had the same short white hair. He hadn't made a move, and had only given him a meaningful glance. In the air, the heavenly materials sword that had been about to stab him directly changed direction halfway. Then it abruptly shot toward Chengyu, the master of a mortal mansion. Chengyu's face turned pale. With just a glance, Jinka had actually forcibly changed his command. This was a magic treasure that he had signed a contract with. Chengyu's expression finally changed as he watched the heavenly materials sword stab at him. His repeated commands didn't have the slightest effect. In a moment of desperation, he could only bite the tip of his tongue and use his blood essence as a medium to perform a hand seal, forcing the power of the contract to restrain the spirit sword. In the end, the heavenly materials sword stopped in front of him, and he pretended to spit out a mouthful of blood. Using the power of blood essence to perform a hand seal, to force the power of the contract to restrain the spirit sword would damage the contract. Usually, under the conditions of a magic treasure's contract, this kind of command could only be used 3 times, and it would result in a violent backlash. Once these 3 times were over, the contract between him and the magic treasure would be severed, and he would have to sign a new contract. It could be said that this was a disadvantage of the heavenly materials sword not having a sword spirit inside, which was why the power of the contract was so easily shaken. Although master of a mortal mansion, Chengyu had already anticipated this when he had forged the sword back then. When the contract was unstable, there might indeed be 1 or 2 instances where the spirit sword wouldn't listen to his command. Thus, whenever he took out the heavenly materials sword, Chengyu always concentrated his mental energy to ensure that his command was accurate. However, Chengyu had never imagined that his orders would actually be changed halfway through his orders. How did you get out? Although Chengyu was in midair, he looked at the brown-robed and white-robed Zheng Tai on the ground. He only felt that his footsteps were light, as if he was about to fall. In the face of this completely unreasonable power, Chengyu felt a trace of fear. On the ground, there wasn't the slightest change in Jinka's expression as he tilted his head and looked at Wang Ling. Is it very difficult? He spoke very slowly, almost enunciating every word. His tone was filled with tiredness and a little arrogance. He didn't take him seriously at all. Impudent. Chengyu let out a shrill roar, his voice shaking the sky and shaking the icebergs in the intrinsic spirit field. Countless blades of wind seemed to blow in the air, carrying the broken ice of the spirit field in all directions. And this was just the aftermath of the screech. The real energy was all concentrated on Jinka. Jinka's face was as unruffled as an ancient well. He didn't even blink as he stood in front of Fangxing, and all the ice shards that had come howling at him were blocked by the 10-foot sword chi that had risen up on its own. Nothing could get close to him within this 10-foot radius. Fangxing lay on his side on the ground and clutched his right shoulder above his collarbone as he struggled to regulate his breathing. That sword just now had almost pierced his heart. If Jinka hadn't appeared in time to stop Chengyu from stabbing him one last time, he would have died long ago. The storm caused by the screech raged for a long time, and Jinka's white robe flapped in the wind. After a full 2 minutes, the storm finally died down. Jinka straightened his clothes and sighed deeply in his heart. Young people nowadays were really getting harder and harder to deal with. The standoff was still going on. Chengyu landed on the ground and put away his incorporeal spirit sword. Because of Jinka's appearance, he didn't even dare fly anymore. He was well aware that now wasn't the time to pretend to be a big-tailed wolf. He had to concentrate and go all out to ensure that there wouldn't be a situation where the command would be changed halfway through. But given the current situation, Chengyu didn't dare continue using the heavenly material sword. Without a sword spirit inside the sword, the risk was too great. Thus, after landing, Chengyu put away the heavenly materials sword and once again used the power of the intrinsic spirit field. All the spirit swords sealed in the glaciers of this intrinsic spirit field had sword spirits, and he had signed contracts with them, so they were relatively stable when he used them. This time, he had to defeat the other party in one go, and not give him any chance to turn things around. Demonstration of 100 swords. Chengyu grit his teeth and directly activated the 100 swords. Countless spirit swords broke out of the glaciers like butterflies. He didn't even have time to summon them to his side. As soon as they broke through the ice, they turned into meteors that shot toward Jinka. From Feng Xing's point of view, this attack this time could be said to be shocking enough. It could be said that Chengyu was going all out. With all his might, he used all his might to control these spirit swords, turning them into large meteors that smashed down. This time, none of the hundreds of spirit swords turned back, and each one hit the bullseye. Full power. After realizing that the attack was effective, Chengyu was wild with joy and immediately made a decision. With a wave of his hand, he manipulated even more spirit swords to break through the ice and attack Jinka in unison. Nearly 1,000 spirit swords continued to attack, bombarding for more than 3 minutes before they finally stopped. Master of a mortal mansion, Chengyu stood in the distance, gasping for breath as he waited for the ice fog to disperse after the bombardment. However, unexpectedly, there were still 2 figures in the ice fog. Chengyu's heart trembled, and he immediately made a hand seal to try to summon back the 1,000 spirit swords he had just released. Unexpectedly, none of them responded. How could this be? Why couldn't he feel the connection between him and these spirit swords? Chengyu stared in front of him in horror. Gradually, he saw the layers of ice fog recede, and the 1,000 spirit swords he had just shot out were all lying on the ground in disorder. Jinka was still standing in his original position, unmoving. He looked straight ahead and took a deep breath. Facing the thousands of spiritual swords lying on the ground, he gave his first command. You know what to do, right? Almost in an instant, the 1,000 spirit swords rose in response, their tips extremely neat, as they all pointed in Chengyu's direction. Chapter 305. In that instant, Chengyu, the master of a mortal mansion, finally experienced what true despair felt like. His eyes were deeply sunken, and at this moment, he looked as if he had aged several decades. Even his hair had instantly turned white. In that short instant just now, the thousands of spiritual swords had actually severed the contract with him at the same time. It was as if his jade mansion was in a sea of magma and fire, and he was in infinite pain. Chengyu now understood a little what kind of person he was facing. If summoning a familiar back then was a lucky chance bestowed upon him by the heavens, then the person standing in front of him now was a genuine pay-to-win player. At that moment, Chengyu finally realized that this was a meaningless fight, because he had no chance of winning from the very beginning. What on earth are you? The moment Chengyu vomited blood from the backlash of the spirit sword contract being severed, Jinka gave him a meaningful look. The expression on his face remained unchanged, and his dead fish eyes, which he had inherited from Wang Ling, looked extremely lifelike in that moment. Then, the 1,000 spirit swords behind Jinka gave off a hum, as they shone with light, as dazzling as the stardust in the Milky Way. After that, Jinka saw the master of Immortal Mansion's humiliated gaze. A Grand Peak late itinerant immortal, the bishop of a top dark force, had actually ended up like this. Chengyu grit his teeth. He knew that he had nowhere to run. The backlash from the broken contract between these 1,000 spirit swords was still going on. Gritting his teeth, he made a hand seal and instantly ended the intrinsic spirit field. These 1,000 spirit swords had been sealed in the field by the familiar he had summoned earlier. In theory, as long as he could end the intrinsic spirit field, the concentrated attack of these 1,000 spirit swords wouldn't reach him. After that, as long as he used a spirit talisman to escape, he would at least be able to escape alive. As for revenge, that was a matter for another time. As long as he could live, anything was possible. Every time before a battle, Chengyu would plan a way out for himself, but he never expected this day to come so soon. Before he could fulfill his dream of creating a peerless godly sword, he had already been beaten up in his intrinsic spirit field. If word of this got out, he would definitely be laughed at for 10,000 years. It would be the biggest joke in the world. But no matter how much people laughed at him, it was better to be alive than dead. Thus, Chengyu's hand speed was practically faster than any of his previous hand seals, as he swiftly completed this one, for fear that Jinka would launch an attack while he was doing it. Success! The moment the seal was completed, Chengyu couldn't help but smile. He spat out a mouthful of blood and watched the intrinsic spirit field in front of him slowly disappear. In fact, the moment Chengyu made the hand seal, Jinka had already seen it. If he wanted to, Chengyu's hands would be chopped off in an instant. However, he did not do so, because the task Wang Ling had given him this time was just to control these 1,000 spirit swords as the king of sword spirits. Now his mission was complete. Jinka was well aware that his little Master Ling had always been a man of his word. If little Master Ling didn't tell him what to do and Jinka crossed the line, little Master Ling would be angry. When Ling Jinren got angry, the consequences were very serious. In Glittering Jewels Pavilion, when grenade-throwing senior immortal saw Master of Immortal Mansion Chengyu seal the intrinsic spirit field on the screen, he quickly realized that the other party might use an escape talisman to escape. Should we set up an array? Fatty Luo asked. In a situation like this, using an array to seal off the space and stop the talisman from being released normally was a relatively good idea. Almost the instant Dharmaraja saw the intrinsic spirit field end, his hands instantly flashed with lightning as he directly used the godly thunder inheritance to seal off all the entrances to Glittering Jewels Pavilion. If Chengyu tried to force his way out, he would have to endure the godly thunder inheritance. Dharmaraja's godly thunder inheritance might not have had any effect on Chengyu when he was at his peak, but he would definitely be electrocuted if he tried to escape in his current state. No matter what, he has nowhere to go. Dharmaraja smiled, very confident in the power of his godly thunder inheritance. Even Pikachu wouldn't be able to escape the blockade of 10 layers of the godly thunder inheritance. Don't be careless. Silian Jinren had a faint bad feeling. This Master of Immortal Mansion has endless tricks up his sleeves. The Holy Ice Crystal Array is still active, so he might have more than one talisman to cover his escape. I agree. Grenade-throwing senior immortal nodded. Everyone keep a close eye on him. We can't let him escape again. At this time the Silver Unicorn sighed. It's a pity that I've already used my intrinsic spirit field. Otherwise, when he withdraws from his intrinsic spirit field, I'll use my own spiritual field to trap him like a nesting doll. That's the safest way. No matter how many tricks he has, he can't escape. Wang Ling's eyes suddenly lit up at the Silver Unicorn's suggestion. But at that moment, everyone's attention was focused on Chengyu in the image, and no one noticed Ling Jinren's expression. After that, Wang Ling slowly got up. Spirit light flickered in his hand, and everyone saw that Jinka had already returned to his hand in the form of a peachwood sword. Then, Fang Xing also appeared, and Immortal Toya directly strode over to help him to one side for emergency treatment. Only the Master of Immortal Mansion was left. Everyone held their breaths as they waited for Chengyu to appear. Wang Ling could already imagine that the moment Chengyu appeared, everyone's aura would wrap around him, and they would do everything they could to stop him from leaving. In fact, Wang Ling had already thought of a way to deal with the Master of Immortal Mansion. After the intrinsic spirit field ended, those who didn't possess it would be the first to be evacuated. So Chengyu would appear a little later. But that was no longer important, because the moment Chengyu's figure reappeared in Glittering Jewels Pavilion, everyone saw Wang Ling step forward, his red and black jacket fluttering gently in the wind. In the next moment, the scene in front of everyone actually changed once again. They came to a square and saw an old stone sculpture. Next to it were a dozen or so palm trees that were nearing the end of their lives that hadn't fallen down. Fang Xing couldn't be more familiar with this scene, because this was number 60 high school. What's going on? Master of Immortal Mansion Chengyu turned pale with fright. He couldn't be more familiar with this feeling. This was an intrinsic spirit field. He had just emerged from his own spirit field, and had even taken out his spirit talisman. But in the end, he had been sucked in by another intrinsic spirit field. The silver unicorn turned pale with fright. Through the magnetic field, it could sense that this was a brand new intrinsic spirit field, and its spirit energy was incomparably pure. The corners of grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's mouth couldn't help twitching as he stared at Wang Ling. Brother Ling, is this your intrinsic spirit field? Wang Ling nodded his head. In the end, all of them were gobsmacked. What? When did Ling Junren open up an intrinsic spirit field? Wang Ling was silent at this question, but in the end, he didn't say it out loud for fear of damaging everyone's confidence in cultivation, because he had just learned this intrinsic spirit field just a minute ago. This could be seen from the modeling of the scene. Chapter 306. The construction of the intrinsic spirit field was actually a complicated subject. The source of spiritual power was the key, and the tree trunk could be divided into multiple complicated branching routes. In addition to the spiritual power origin, modeling was also very important. After his previous fight with the silver unicorn, and his careful observation of the intrinsic spirit field, which Master of Immortal Mansion, Cheng Yu had released this time, Wang Ling had been meticulously making all kinds of calculations and summaries in these two battles. He could even solve a difficult high school chemistry question like a talisman and a seal script in 3 minutes. Analyzing the formula for constructing an intrinsic spirit field was only a matter of minutes. Cheng Yu, the Master of Immortal Mansion, knelt on the ground in despair, his face ashen. He knew he couldn't escape. If he was trapped in someone else's intrinsic spirit field, he wouldn't be able to use any talismans, unless he had a powerful magic weapon that could destroy the field. However, with his crippled body, what could he do now? Master of Immortal Mansion, do you have anything else to say? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal stared at Cheng Yu. Cheng Yu opened his mouth, but no words came out. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal looked at him calmly. You have the right to remain silent, but whatever you say next will be used against you in court. It could be said that all the people standing here were witnesses to the decline of Immortal Mansion. They watched helplessly as a crazy spirit sword collector demon forcibly terminated all the spirit sword contracts. And then, as if he had gone mad, his hair instantly turned white from worry. Jinka had already given the Master of Immortal Mansion the best punishment. Salian Jumren sighed. How to deal with the Master of Immortal Mansion, and the mess he had left behind was another big problem. The group of female disciples outside the Immortal Mansion still needed a lawyer to determine their nature. Although they were abducted when they were young and could be said to be innocent, according to Salian Jinren's judgment, they would definitely be sentenced to labor reform. But then again, these female inner court disciples had been educated in a closed environment. Although they lacked a lot of knowledge about modern cultivation and had a limited understanding of modern society, they still had a lot of knowledge about it. However, each of them was a talent that could be molded. This was a huge amount of soul formation stage resources. If it could be developed and used properly, it could provide a new batch of strength for the country's military. Before becoming a station manager in Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's cultivation forum, Salian Jinren had spent some time in the Women's Special Forces. From her point of view, if this group of female disciples were to be sent in and trained, they would be able to film a movie called I Am Special Forces Fire Phoenix next year. Brother Ling, is there any way to restrict his movements? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was still a little worried. Wang Ling nodded and raised his hand to cast the Great Silence spell. A long time ago, when cultivators cast spells, in addition to forming hand seals, they also needed to chant. Thus, the Great Muting spell was born at that time. This spell could not only seal one's mouth, but it could also block the release of spiritual energy from the body, truly muting people. However, he had also made another optimization when he used it, and that was to remove the rule of sealing one's mouth. This was to prevent the Master of Immortal Mansion from playing dead during the interrogation. This was a mute package that only Ling Junren had. Cheng Yu knelt on the ground, his heart filled with fear. As the master of a mortal mansion, his experience wasn't shallow, and he could tell at a glance that the youngster in front of him had used one of the 3,000 great Daos on him. It was actually the 3,000 great Daos. This was the most powerful Taoist spell that countless cultivators yearned for like a flock of ducks. Even immortal mode, and the White Knight spell couldn't hold a candle to it. What frightened Chengyu the most was that this Ling Junren's method of casting spells was so practiced, easy and casual. Chengyu hadn't even seen him form hand seals. He would never be able to learn this technique in his entire life. What kind of person had he offended? As expected, Brother Ling is amazing. Grenade-throwing senior immortal breathed a sigh of relief. Now, even if the intrinsic spirit field disappeared, the master of a mortal mansion wouldn't be able to use any tricks to escape. After that, he saw grenade-throwing senior immortal search the master of a mortal mansion for a while, and finally found the spatial magic treasure that the master of a mortal mansion used to store his treasures. It was a token with the words heaven and earth inside written on it. Staring at the token, grenade-throwing senior immortal sighed, and then looked at Chengyu a little angrily. Look at you. How much wealth have you plundered from the people all these years for that lousy sword of yours? Chengyu, Dharmaraja, senior immortal, are these things going to be handed over to the nation? Grenade-throwing senior immortal. Of course. But I think some of the resources can still be used. We've used up a lot of spirit talismans, elixirs and so on the way here. I think we can replenish them appropriately. What do you think? Shall we take stock together? Except for Wang Ling, everyone else said in unison, we think senior immortal's words make sense. Wang Ling. Inside Wang Ling's intrinsic spirit field, a group of people were taking stock of their magic treasures under a palm tree. Immortal Toya was still treating Fang Xing. After coming out of the intrinsic spirit field, Fang Xing had fallen into a coma, and his injuries were more serious than Immortal Toya had imagined. Immortal Toya had already bandaged his external wounds, and had even taken out several precious tonics, which he had painstakingly refined for several months, and fed them to Fang Xing. However, although the bleeding had stopped, the young man showed no signs of waking up at all. How's the situation? Wang Ling raised his eyebrows and asked telepathically. Immortal Toya frowned at first, then shook his head. I've done my best, Wang Ling. Very quickly, Immortal Toya felt that his words were ambiguous, and hurriedly corrected himself. Ling Junren, don't misunderstand. What I mean is that with the current limited medical resources available, I've already done everything I can. To be honest, Brother Fang Xing's wound is a little strange. There's no way a normal spirit sword wound can cause sword qi to linger in the meridians for a long time after the sword is pulled out and cause damage. Speaking up to this point, Immortal Toya frowned and cupped his chin as he said, Actually, I don't think this thing can be considered sword qi, but it's like a stubborn bug that keeps gnawing away at Brother Fang Xing's meridians. Furthermore, it inhibits the production of spirit energy, making it impossible for the spirit energy in Brother Fang Xing's body to circulate. This is the biggest problem with his current coma. Wang Ling frowned. He opened his heavenly eye to scan Fang Xing's body, and sure enough, as Immortal Toya had said, he found the mysterious qi flowing through Fang Xing's meridians. It wasn't sword qi. Wang Ling's hands glowed with spirit light as he tried to remove it with the Great Purification spell, but unexpectedly failed. Sure enough, was there a problem with the Heavenly Materials sword? Chapter 307. But there was no hurry right now. The 1,000 spirit swords and master of a mortal mansion, Cheng-Yu's intrinsic spirit field, including the Heavenly Materials sword, were currently under Jinka's control. He was considering handing over the other spirit swords to the state, and only keeping the Heavenly Materials sword for Fatty Luo to study. He felt that this spirit sword was made of a very special material. Perhaps it wasn't as simple as he had imagined. As everyone had expected, there were a lot of strange magic treasures in Cheng-Yu's inner universe. Whether it was in terms of quantity or quality, they weren't the slightest bit inferior to the equipment that General Yi had dropped when he had captured the old devil. Furthermore, grenade-throwing senior immortal had already searched many of the treasures on the Cultural Relics Bureau's official website, and they were all National Treasure magic treasures that had been on the loose. The reason why National Treasure magic treasures were called so wasn't simply because they were strong or weak. Every piece of national-level magical equipment had a touching story that carried forward the traditional virtues of society. Among the many magic treasures Chengyu had collected, the most top-notch National Treasure magic treasure was actually an exquisitely wrapped matchbox. What's this? Everyone was blank when they saw the matchbox. Dharmaraja opened the matchbox and found that there were no more matches inside. However, the entire matchbox was very exquisite. The four sides of the box, which was made of spirit wood, were inlaid with metal lace. It was simply like a top-notch work of art. Looking at the matchbox, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal suddenly said, "Have you heard the story of the little match that sold girls?" Everyone was suddenly enlightened. Oh, it turned out to be the story of the little match that sold girls. Wait! Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal seemed to be talking about the little match that sold girls just now? F***K. What the hell was that? This is a real story that has been passed down in the past. There was a match that had become a spirit, and on Thanksgiving Day, he sold little girls on the street. It caused public outrage at the time. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said with a sigh. Someone asked, "What happened next?" Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. This little match that trafficked girls was burned to death on the street. Everyone. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal held the matchbox and said, "So, this matchbox was actually specially made by a skilled craftsman back then. This incident served as a warning to society to care for young children and reject human trafficking. Reject child abuse and cruelty." Everyone. Chengyu, the master of Immortal Mansion, knelt on the ground and shivered as he listened to this story, his hair standing on end. He had obtained this matchbox when he attacked the other dark forces. Even he did not know its exact origin. However, it had helped him overcome many difficulties. There was a period of time when he was at his most difficult. Chengyu remembered that he had stayed in the matchbox for a period of time to avoid being hunted down by his enemies. Oh right, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal suddenly thought of something. This matchbox actually has a storage function, but when it was designed back then, its original intention wasn't to make it a storage space. As he spoke, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal injected spirit energy into the matchbox. In a flash, the small matchbox abruptly expanded into a rectangular storage space that was as big as a person. So, the original intention of this matchbox was, this is the coffin lid that the craftsman specially made for the match spirit back then, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said as he cupped his chin. Chengyu. Everyone. At the same time, it was 10 o'clock in the evening in the outside world. About 2 hours ago, the Cultivation Police Station on Sanyuan Road in Winter City had received a tip from the public that there was a broken space here. The originally empty Sanyuan Road was now surrounded by police cars, and the police had set up a long cordon around the space tunnel, which had been blasted open by the power of Wang Ling's heavenly eye. A group of police officers stood more than 10 meters away from the broken space wall. The energy fluctuations coming from it were so strong that no one dared to approach it. Are the bomb squad here yet? Chief Yu of the police station had already arrived to give instructions on the scene. They're on the way. A junior police officer was reporting on his work. He was only at the golden core stage and didn't dare approach the broken space wall at all. The energy inside was too ferocious, and he felt that if he got any closer, he would be torn to shreds by the raging spirit power. In the distance, a black commercial car drove over and was stopped by a police officer at an intersection. Seeing that it was a sky blue government license plate, the police officer hurriedly went to the driver's window and saluted respectfully. "Comrade, there's been an accident up ahead. Please make a detour." Zhao Kai rolled down the window and stuck his head out. "Brother, may I ask what's going on?" The police officer replied in a low voice. 2 hours ago, we received a tip from the public that there was a broken space wall up ahead. There's now a raging spirit power in the space wall, and no one dares approach it. The bomb squad will be here soon. All right, thank you, brother. Zhao Kai nodded. then closed the window, and turned to look at Audua behind him. Shifu, what do we do now? Audua rubbed his chin and looked at him. Are you sure this is where Ling Jinren and the others were sent down? Zhao Kai nodded abruptly like a chicken pecking at rice. It's definitely here, there's no mistake. Shifu. Audua folded his arms, his face instantly darkening. Even an idiot now knew that this broken space wall was definitely destroyed by your grandmaster. But Audua was well aware that whenever his Shifu took action, there had to be a reason. He seemed to have heard Grenade-throwing senior Immortal mention something about Immortal Mansion, a major dark force before, so Audua guessed that Shifu Ling Jinren had come to Winter City for this matter. In summary, Audua guessed that there were probably two possibilities. First, Shifu had smashed the space wall and entered the world inside, but hadn't finished what he had to do, so he hadn't had time to come out. This was the most likely scenario. Second, Shifu had run into trouble and couldn't come out. Of course, Audua thought that the probability of this happening was 1 in 10,000. It was practically impossible. Thus, the current situation was already very clear. He had to think of a way to stall the police, and before it was announced to the media, he had to first block the news until Shifu and the others had completely withdrawn from Winter City. Thinking this, Audua waved his hand and had Zhao Kai roll down the window. The police uncle from before was still standing next to the car. Comrade, is there anything else I can help you with? Zhao Kai grinned and looked at the police officer. Our leader is very interested in this matter and might be able to help. I'll have to trouble you to inform your chief. Leader? Which leader? The police uncle's expression instantly became nervous. He carefully crouched down and stealthily glanced at the back of the car, out of the corner of his eye. When he saw Audua's face, he instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 308. In fact, even Audua himself hadn't expected his reputation to have already spread so far. This wasn't just because of his relationship with Secretary Dakong, but also because of the major events that had happened around him. From the time he had officially become the deputy director of the General Administration of 100 Schools, the Gate Between Worlds incident 6 years ago, the arrest of the younger sister of the Master of Shadow Stream, Jiang Luiying, who had escaped and been recaptured a few months ago, and the most frightening thing was that even the old devil's arrest had something to do with Audua. It could be said that ever since Audua had chosen the path of serving the people, his official career had been on the rise and everything had been smooth sailing. He had encountered several major events in a row, which some people might never achieve in their entire lives. Just thinking about it made his scalp go numb. When this police uncle saw Audua's face, his reaction wasn't as simple as his scalp going numb. He felt like it was going to explode. Zhua, Director Zhua? Why are you here, sir? The police uncle was so shocked that he couldn't speak coherently. I'll go get the chief for you. This was a big shot. Although he was a leading cadre in Songhai City, which was several cities away from Winter City, the police uncle didn't dare offend him at all. This was a legendary figure who had even brought down the old devil. He couldn't afford to offend him at all. Audua was startled by this police uncle's reaction. He felt that this police uncle had misunderstood something. Seeing that the police uncle had gone to call for his chief, Audua hurriedly pointed to his face and asked Zhao Kai, "Am I that scary?" Zhao Kai couldn't help snickering. Ever since that old devil was arrested, there have been different rumors about Shifu in every city and place. As for public opinion, there's always truth and falsehood. Some news will deliberately exaggerate in order to attract attention. Audua. Then how did they spread the rumor about me? Zhao Kai. I'm not sure about the situation in other cities, but there's a widely circulated version in Winter City that Shifu assisted General Yi in setting up the 5 elements Great Array, and then used the verbal escape technique to make that old devil cry on the spot and lay down his arms and surrender. Audua. It's all gossip, Shifu. You don't have to care too much about it. Zhao Kai scratched the back of his head. Audua looked at him. Then, what do you think about the veracity of these things? I think it's a half-truth. Zhao Kai laughed heartily. You say if this is true, And master is so awesome, then how coquettish must the ancestor be? Adjoa. While they were talking, the policeman who had run out earlier had already returned with his bureau chief. He was a middle-aged man who looked very righteous. From his well-ironed uniform, it could be seen that he was a person who did things in a very disciplined manner. Out of politeness, Adjoa directly got out of the car without the slightest air of an official. The middle-aged director was blank for a moment, before he hurriedly stepped forward to shake hands with him, and put on a smile. Director Joa, I've long heard of your great name. I wonder if Director Joa is here for official business or personal matters. Adjoa thought carefully for a bit before directly saying, business. There was no way he would betray his Shifu. Before coming to Sanyuan Road, he had already told Victory Zhao that he absolutely couldn't tell anyone that Ling Zhenren and his people were here. His Shifu had always liked to keep a low profile. If this incident was accidentally reported by the media, Shifu would definitely be very unhappy. After thinking for a bit, Adjoa cleared his throat and continued. Well, actually, I was the one who led this operation from another city. I haven't had the time to report it yet. After hearing Adjoa's words, all the police officers present were dumbfounded. Not long ago, our Songhai City's General Administration of 100 schools received a report that some criminals were suspected of kidnapping students. So our General Administration of 100 schools immediately launched an investigation. In the end, we followed the clues and found this huge dark force organization. Adjoa had thought of this excuse in the car earlier, and it could be considered a random excuse. The space wall you see now is actually broken by the people we sent. Hearing this, the police officers, including this bureau chief, all sucked in cold breaths. Adjoa glanced at the police number on this bureau chief's chest, which was engraved with a name. He realized that this bureau chief's surname was Yu, and his first name was Yu. Chief Yu, I need to reflect. I'm late. All of a sudden, Adjoa stared at this bureau chief, stepped forward, and gripped his hand with a remorseful expression. Chief Yu. This was a secret operation assigned by our higher-ups, and Secretary Dakong personally signed off on it. As the person in charge of this operation, it was my dereliction of duty for not contacting Winter City in advance. No need to take it to heart, Director Joa. It was also my fault for not understanding the situation in advance. Chief Yu felt inexplicably flattered. Then, Zhao Kai and the other police officers saw the two leaders shake hands and bow to each other in apology, as if they were bowing to heaven and earth. Although this was just a formality, Yu's rumored impression of Adjoa changed a lot. He gripped Adjoa's hand tightly and said with a serious expression, If there's anything you need us to cooperate with, Director Joa, feel free to let us know. All right. Adjoa nodded solemnly, and then unhurriedly set out his requirements. First, this is a secret mission assigned to us by Secretary Dakong. So before the results of the investigation are out, we have to keep the news under wraps and not let the media know. Second, we have to strictly protect the privacy of everyone in the investigation team entering this dark forces lair. That's all for now. After Adjoa said this, Chief Yu immediately looked at his subordinate next to him. Did you hear that? Immediately call the technical team and get the media under control. Those who called for interviews earlier now reject all of them. The junior police officer stood ramrod straight and immediately nodded in salute. Yes, Chief. After doing this, Adjoa stared at the broken space wall not far away and heaved a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had arrived in time, and the situation was under control. Otherwise, if the first batch of media had arrived, the situation would have become a lot more troublesome. Zhao Kai parked the car and followed Adjoa. There was one thing he was very curious about, so he asked Adjoa in a very low voice. Shifu, when did Secretary Dakong approve this? There was no need to hide this matter from his own family, so Adjoa directly answered. To be precise, just now. Zhao Kai was blank. Just now? That's right, 10 minutes ago, on the way here, I sent Secretary Dakong a text message, said Adjoa. Zhao Kai was stunned. He had never thought that Audiobook and Secretary Dakong would actually be so familiar with each other that he would immediately approve a text message. Ignoring Zhao Kai's shocked expression, Audiobook looked at the time and said, "I sent Shifu a text message earlier, and he replied with a series of ellipses. What does that mean? You'll know when you're in contact with them more in the future. You have to learn to read all kinds of languages from the ellipses. I reckon they're almost done. I have a task for you now. Hold a welcome party for them later." "What do you want me to do?" Zhao Kai was suddenly a little nervous. "Later I'll drive. Get Chief Yu a 5-star red flag of our country, and put it on your arm. Then squat on the roof of the car, and find 2 people to support you. Once they come out, we'll drive over." Chapter 309. It was June 27th on Tuesday, in the 10th week of the semester. In the wee hours of the morning, all the train crews had heard the news. Wang Ling followed grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, and the others on the last spirit bus back to Songhai City. Audiobook actually didn't know much about Immortal Mansion, and it took grenade-throwing Senior Immortal a long time to explain everything to him. Audiobook had personally bought the tickets for the spirit bus back to Songhai City. He had also personally handled the secret transportation of the Silver Unicorn to ensure that no one would find out. After that, there was still a lot of mess left behind by Immortal Mansion that Audiobook had to deal with. It was only then that Wang Ling realized the benefits of having Audiobook as his disciple. Although he had accepted Audiobook on a whim back then, it hadn't been a loss. At the very least, Audiobook was a lot more considerate than he had imagined. But while he had left these trivial matters to Audiobook, there were still some bigger issues that needed to be dealt with together. On the spirit bus, everyone was pondering Fangxing's problem, because Fangxing still hadn't woken up. "When we go back, I'll personally visit Brother Fangxing's parents. They must be very worried now." Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. Fangxing had used the excuse of going on a study exchange trip to report to his parents this time. And now that he was unconscious, it would be hard for him to explain to his adoptive parents. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had met this couple of the Fang family a long time ago. They were honest people who ran a noodle shop dutifully, and had doted on Fangxing since he was a child. If they saw their child come back unconscious after going on a study exchange trip, it would be strange if they didn't strangle him to death. If my guess is correct, we'll definitely find the answer in that heavenly material sword. But I can only come to a conclusion after I use my tools to carefully analyze the material of the sword. Fatty Luo sighed. He now had the heavenly materials sword on him. Before handing it over to Audiobook, he had personally invaded the intrinsic spirit field to get it, along with more than 1,000 spirit swords from Chengyu. Except for the heavenly material sword, the rest had been handed over to the nation. "All right, then I'll have to trouble you, Brother Luo." Fatty Luo nodded solemnly and said, "Don't mention it. I'll let you know as soon as there's news." Immortal Toya also expressed his stance. "Brother Fangxing can stay on my Chrysanthemum Island for the next 2 days. It'll be easier for me to take care of him. On the other hand, I also want to try some new methods to wake Brother Fangxing up." Wang Ling stared blankly at Fangxing's face. It could be said that Fangxing's coma was the biggest variable in the siege of Immortal Mansion's core base. It was precisely because of this variable that Loopy Toad's dream of a Taoist in red stabbing a fatty with 100 swords didn't happen. According to the normal script, the person who should be unconscious now should be Fatty Luo or Dharmaraja. But he knew that there was no point in discussing this right now. As for the other thorny problem in front of them, it was the art courtyard, who was still in a coma. The girl was sleeping soundly behind the hearse, and drool was still dripping from the corner of her mouth, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. "Brother Ling, are you sure you've cured him?" Why did he still feel that this girl was a little silly? This time, it was Wang Ling's turn to drop his forehead into his hand. Although his great purification spell had expelled the poison in the girl's body, it didn't mean that it could directly remove the girl's attributes. It was possible that even if she woke up, she would still be an idiot. "So someone is willing to take her in." As soon as grenade-throwing Senior Immortal said this, The men in the car all turned their heads. Needless to say, it was impossible for Wang Ling to take in anyone. Immortal Toya had already taken Fang Xing in, while Fatty Luo and Dharmaraja, these two damn fat shut-ins, were celibate. In the end, Xilian Jinren sighed. Then leave this lady to me for the time being. But then again, why are all of you so unwilling? All of you are still single, right? You're already so old. You should think about yourself and raise a child to support yourself in old age. Useless, useless. Fu Wang waved his hand and chuckled. You have a boyfriend. So of course you don't know the benefits of living alone. When you're single, you can eat whatever you want. On weekends, he could stay at home all day, watch videos, drink and sleep. The room did not need to be cleaned at all. And the most important thing is, I don't lack girlfriends. When he said this, everyone in the car looked astonished. When did you get a girlfriend? Dharmaraja. I have all kinds. It's just that it's a little troublesome to use them, and I have to blow them out. Everyone. The corners of Xilian Jinren's mouth twitched. Serves you right for being single for 1,000 years. When Wang Ling got home, it was exactly 6 o'clock in the morning. Because he usually didn't like to talk at home, Father and Mother Wang hadn't discovered that he had sent a clone to school in his place. The only person who had sensed anything unusual was Loopy Toad. Ever since this guy had turned into a dog, its sense of smell had increased by the day. When it had been a toad, Loopy Toad had trained its tongue, which was also called ventriloquism in the toad world. Now that it had become a dog, Loopy Toad trained its nose every day. Loopy Toad could clearly sense that little Master Ling's real body and his clone's scent were different. If this was little Master Ling's real body, his skin would give off a faint fragrance. There was no way it could be wrong. So when Wang Ling teleported back to his room that morning, Loopy Toad, who was lying on the mat on the first floor, opened its eyes almost instantly. It knew that little Master Ling was back. Furthermore, from the subtle aura in the air, Loopy Toad felt that little Master Ling didn't seem very happy. Indeed, Wang Ling was a little absent-minded today. He didn't know what was going on. But in the morning, he had been staring blankly at an empty seat in class, which was Fang Xing's seat. Wang Ling was very concerned that the Great Purification spell was unable to purify the strange gas in Fang Xing's body. Fortunately, Fatty Luo was extremely efficient. After school that day, Wang Ling opened his message and saw that Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal had already sent him a screenshot of Fatty Luo's analysis of the Heavenly Materials Swords material list, and even some of the trace elements had been detected. Wang Ling was very familiar with some of the materials in this list, but he had never seen some of them before. After thinking for a bit, Wang Ling simply sent this screenshot to Wang Ming. Less than 3 seconds later, Wang Ling felt his wristwatch vibrate fiercely. His dumbass brother had actually replied in seconds. Haha, I knew you missed me. In Wang Ming's reply he wrote. Chapter 310. The two brothers shared the same impression, that the number of times Wang Ling took the initiative to look for Wang Ming could be counted on the fingers of one hand. Every time Wang Ming was asked a favor, he would be happy all day at the research institute. He didn't even need to eat. He could laugh himself to his heart's content. Sometimes, having a realm of unlimited growth and absolute strength didn't mean that you didn't need help from others. As Wang Ling's cousin, Wang Ming wanted to do whatever he could to help his brother. Thus, even if Wang Ling didn't usually look for him on his own initiative, Wang Ming would set Wang Ling's various communication channels as VIP stars, so that he could be the first to see any news from Wang Ling. So for Wang Ming, instant replies could only be considered a normal operation. In terms of kinship, Wang Ling was the younger brother closest to Wang Ming. If he didn't help his own younger brother, who would? After staring at the screenshot Wang Ling had sent him for a long while, Wang Ming frowned deeply, and in the end, he actually directly called Wang Ling back. Hello, Lingzi. Wang Ling exhaled, using the sound of his breathing to indicate his presence. Wang Ming understood. I'll have to come over personally, and I'll explain it to you when I get there. That's settled then, bye-bye. Wang Ling. By my ass. After saying that, Wang Ming directly hung up, acting arbitrarily, and not giving Wang Ling the slightest chance to refuse. After hanging up, Wang Ming happily crossed his legs at the research institute and hummed a tune as he did so, as if he had won the lottery. On the side, President Qi, who was still playing with a test tube, glanced at Wang Ming and chuckled. "Are you teasing your little brother again?" Wang Ming was surprised. "How did you know?" President Qi stared at Wang Ming, as if he had seen through everything, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help curling up. There was even a hint of mockery in his eyes. "You basically study this, and that with a straight face every day at the research institute. It's only when you tease your little brother that you smile like a fool." Wang Ming was speechless for a moment, then pursed his lips. "When did I?" President Qi didn't reply, because there was no point in arguing like this. He snorted in his heart, a little amused. This damn brother con. When Wang Ling returned home that day, as soon as he entered the house, he saw the old man happily walking into the kitchen with 2 giant grouper in his hands. This was Wang Ming's favorite food, and his enthusiasm for it was no less than Wang Ling's crispy noodle snacks. It was very obvious that Wang Ming had already informed Father Wang, Mother Wang, and the old man of his arrival. Mother Wang had just come back from collecting the clothes upstairs, and was about to go help the old man. When she saw that Wang Ling had returned, she immediately smiled. "Ling Ling, I didn't expect you to be so sensible." Wang Ling tilted his head. Wang Ma covered her mouth and smiled. "Your brother called me today, and said that you personally invited him to our house. I couldn't believe it." Wang Ling, sometimes it's better for family to move around more. Otherwise, how could they be considered relatives? Only by moving around more would they be considered relatives. Nowadays, how many people are closer to their neighbors than their relatives? What do you think this is? As Mother Wang spoke, she put on her apron and smiled radiantly. "All right, I'll go help with the cooking. You and your dad can spend some time in the living room." Wang Ling was stupefied by Mother Wang's words, and he didn't dare refute her at all. He also couldn't find any reason to refute her, because what she said made sense. "Sit." Father Wang patted the sofa for Wang Ling to sit next to him. Because of the explosion in his hand yesterday, Father Wang had done an exceptional job writing the 200,000 words he had planned to send out this week, which was why he was in the mood to go downstairs to watch the evening news before dinner. Wang Ling remembered that it had been a very long time since he and his father had sat on the sofa and watched the news together since Father Wang had started his new book, The Live Streaming Life of the Immortal King. Then, as luck would have it, the TV news was broadcasting a big piece of news. Sitting demurely in front of the camera, the female news anchor glanced at the script she was working on and said solemnly, "According to the latest news, Audiobook, director of the General Administration of 100 schools in Shanghai City, worked with the Sanyuan Road Cultivation Police Station in Winter City to destroy a huge dark cultivation gang yesterday. Around the main suspect Cheng Yu and more than 100 other people. The gang has been recruiting people all over the country, spreading out and gathering armed forces. Currently, according to Cheng Yu's account, the net is being pulled in everywhere." This was followed by a live broadcast of a female reporter at the scene. In the image, Master of Immortal Mansion Cheng Yu was in spirit shackles, as he was escorted out of a police car by several people and pushed toward the detention center in Winter City. His face was still covered in mosaics. He was still wearing that red Taoist robe, and looked even more haggard than when Wang Ling and the others had left. What we're seeing now is the main suspect in this case, Mr. Cheng Yu, who wishes to remain anonymous. The female reporter pointed at Cheng Yu, then hurriedly moved closer and handed the microphone to Cheng Yu. "Mr. Cheng Yu, who wishes to remain anonymous, do you have anything to say at this moment?" Cheng Yu. Although the TV image was covered in a thick layer of mosaics, Wang Ling could still see Cheng Yu's stupefied expression as he stared at the female reporter. Father Wang stared at Cheng Yu in the news for 3 seconds, then turned his gaze to Wang Ling. "You did this, right?" Wang Ling. Father Wang rubbed his chin. "I heard from this news anchor that little Zhuo went to Winter City. Usually, he only goes with you when you go, right?" Wang Ling looked at Father Wang in astonishment. He had never thought that Father Wang would actually be able to see through his secret. Seeing Wang Ling's stunned expression, Father Wang already knew everything in his heart, and he immediately patted Wang Ling on the shoulder. "You're my son. Do you think I can't tell what you're thinking? Wang Ling, don't worry, I'm not blaming you. This kind of illegal and evil force should be eliminated. Furthermore, judging from how hard you've been working, this group of people has probably been provoking our family for a long time, right? Last time, I heard from your grandfather that there was a burly man sneaking around outside the door, and Aku later taught him a lesson." Watching the TV, Father Wang couldn't help laughing. "But this time, you forced him a little too hard. Even his hair turned white." Wang Ling. Father Wang. I remember there was a piece of news a while back about a parent who forced their child to study math, which resulted in his hair turning white. Now that child is counting on his fingers every day to ask what 1000 minus 7 is. Chapter 311. Thus, on the evening news of all the major channels that night, whether it was the official or the local news, the extermination of Immortal Mansion dominated the headlines, and the momentum was almost no less than that of the old devil's arrest. As he watched the news, Wang Ling thought to himself that it was a good thing he had hidden this holy beast. Otherwise, that terrifying group of people from the Animal Lovers Association would definitely take advantage of this incident to start causing trouble. There was nothing wrong with loving animals in itself, but excessive protection was often torture and killing. Holy beasts were originally a group formed from the spirit energy of heaven and earth. In ancient times, they had evolved by relying on the power of their bloodlines. In modern terms, they had evolved and mutated, but in fact there hadn't been many of them in ancient times. In modern times there was almost no trace of them at all. It had been so hard to find a silver unicorn, and it would be a pity to hand it over for nothing. Of course, in Wang Ling's eyes, holy beasts were actually a type of animal. But in most cases, the will of the animal itself should be respected more. Some people were happy that a massive dark force had been exterminated, and some people were worried. In the heart of Shanghai City, on the top floor of the most luxurious office building in Excellent Era Square, the Lord of Immortal Castle's secretary, the lady was restless. She had already seen the evening news. Immortal Mansion had been exterminated. Winter City was Immortal Mansion's core stronghold. All the elders, disciples, core personnel. There had been more than 100 people, and none of them had been spared. The remaining small forces scattered all over the country were also being cleaned up by the joint efforts of the local police. The lady saw that the master of Immortal Mansion, who had been caught, was still a peak-late itinerant immortal. When he had been caught, he had looked as if he had already gone crazy. His face was thin and his hair was white. What on earth had he experienced? The lady leaned back on the huge sofa, her eyes a little absent-minded. She had worked overtime last night to clean up all the accounts between Immortal Castle and Immortal Mansion. Although this fire hadn't reached Immortal Castle yet, it still made her feel a little terrified. Who on earth had Immortal Mansion offended? As she pondered this, the originally transparent French window was suddenly shrouded in a haze. The lady was startled by the reflection of the figure in front of the window, and she hurriedly stood up and bowed. "Greetings, Lord." The black shadow gave a soft and then took a step forward. When it landed, countless black crows appeared out of thin air to form a small wave of birds. After the wave of birds dispersed, a middle-aged man with a gloomy face, a full beard and long hair immediately appeared in front of the lady. The bearded man gave the lady a look, then leaned back in the boss's chair unceremoniously and waved at her. "Don't just stand there. Go make me a cup of milk tea. Last time, we used the fresh milk of an 800-year-old rhinoceros to make a good milk powder. Bring that over, and add 2 pieces of rock candy." "Very well, my lord." The corner of the lady's mouth twitched. She hadn't expected her lord to actually come here in person. There were a lot of first-class teas in the cupboard in her office, but there was only 1 can of milk powder, which had been specially prepared for this leader. In Immortal Castle, she was the only one who knew that the Lord had a special hobby, and that was to drink milk. Have you finished dealing with the matter with Immortal Mansion? The man sked and asked as the lady made the milk powder. The lady's spoon in her hand trembled at this sound. The lady nodded. Don't worry, my lord. We've already wiped clean all connections on the books. They won't be able to trace it back to us. Weren't there 2 girls before that? One was called Azwa, and the other was Ayu. They went after Song Qing-shu. And in the end, one is lying half dead in the hospital, and the other is dead. Sitting in the boss's chair, the middle-aged man rested his chin on his fingers as he said, although these 2 are just outer sect disciples of Immortal Mansion, we still have to be especially careful not to give ourselves away. Ayu is already dead, and there's no way of knowing her whereabouts. As for Azwa, I'll take care of her properly. My lord, please rest assured. The lady nodded and personally brought a cup of steaming milk tea to the man. After a moment of silence, she lowered her head and asked, My lord, why have you personally come to this subordinate's place this time? Is there something you need to tell me personally? The man picked up the cup and blew on it. Ignoring how hot it was, he directly took a big gulp, leaving a layer of milk foam on his lips. Then he nodded contentedly. I didn't come here for anything else. I just wanted to tell you about the follow-up work. Previously, my venerable self wanted to rely on the stone ghost mask to rise, but before I could do anything, that devil was caught after jumping around for less than half a month. The lady. Then, my venerable self realized that Immortal Mansion was developing very well. In the end, before we could even hand over the cooperation agreement, their core department was wiped out. The lady. So, after putting all these things together, have you noticed a problem? It's that these 2 incidents seem to be related to the same person, the man said. The lady. Is it related to Great Death Courting Senior, who Song Qing-shu is relying on? Not really. The man shook his head and stared at the lady. Have you heard of Ajwa? It was him. The lady suddenly understood. This was the director of the General Administration of 100 schools, who had been in the limelight recently. Think about it carefully. Don't all the major events that happened recently, from the Shadow Stream incident to the arrest of the old devil, and finally the destruction of Immortal Mansion, have they all been related to this person? The man snorted. So, our focus was wrong from the beginning. Speaking up to this point, the man touched his beard and realized that 2 drops of milk had gotten into it. He hurriedly scraped them off with his finger, and then licked them clean. After licking his finger, the man smiled. So my venerable self thinks that our focus should be on this man. It's very likely that all the plans were single-handedly planned by him. He's an unfathomable person. But that Great Death Courting Senior and the mysterious expert in that villa on the outskirts. Don't mind the details. The man waved his hand. My venerable self firmly believes that the source of all evil is this person called Ajwa. The lady. The man looked full of confidence as he stared at the lady. Before coming here, my venerable self investigated this person's past. In the end, I found a very interesting person in his high school. As he spoke, spirit light flashed in the Lord's hand. The next moment, a photo appeared in his hand, and he pushed it in front of the lady. Look at this person. This is. The lady took the photo and frowned. Chapter 312. The lady stared blankly at the fat man in the photo. My lord, do you think there's something wrong with this person? This person is number 60 high school's history teacher called Wang Zukang. People call him Old Antique. He once taught Ajwa. So my venerable self speculates that this person might be Ajwa's biggest backer. But my venerable self's investigation shows that he probably came up with this name after he retired from the martial arts world several hundred years ago. The man smiled slightly. Look carefully at this person's face. Don't you think he looks a little familiar? The lady stared at the photo for a long time, then shook her head with a blank expression. Forgive this subordinate for being slow-witted, my lord, please enlighten me. The middle-aged man sighed and stroked his beard. Have you heard of the story of Gorgeous Itinerant? Gorgeous Itinerant? The lady was suddenly enlightened. Of course she had. This was the man who had personally established the international ranking list of killers 1,000 years ago. Furthermore, He was the guardian of the list. This was a genuine top-notch expert, who had left behind a lot of illustrious legends in the cultivation world. The lady clearly remembered that when this gorgeous itinerant had been famous back then, he had once stabbed a soul formation cultivator to death with a finger qigong, and his strength was unfathomable. But it was said that a long time ago, he had withdrawn from the dispute because of a mistake. The lady stared at the photo with a horrified expression on her face. "My lord, are you saying that this high school teacher is gorgeous itinerant?" The middle-aged man nodded solemnly. "That's right." The lady's face was instantly flustered. "But, rumor has it that gorgeous itinerant is one of the most handsome men in the world." Because she had once been interested in gorgeous itinerant, the lady had looked up a lot of information on him. Although she hadn't been able to find a specific photo, based on the accounts of those who had seen gorgeous itinerant's true face, it could be summed up in 4 words: unparalleled in appearance and unmatched in style. So, how could the real gorgeous itinerant be a fatty who ate spicy strips? The lady stared at the photo and took a deep breath. "My lord, this subordinate thinks there's something wrong. You don't allow other people to get fat." The middle-aged man chuckled. "Have you ever heard of a different kind of handsome man?" The lady. After a pause, the middle-aged man got up and slowly stared at the lady. "Don't worry, there's absolutely no mistake. And do you know, back then, there were actually 2 people who established the international assassin ranking." The lady. 2 people. "The lord, gorgeous itinerant is just one of them. There's another senior who's as strong as him, and people give him the nickname, Taoist Taotai. Because its face was incomparably ugly, it looked like a Taotai, hence its name. Many people who have seen his true face were scared to death." The lady. "Castle lord. The 2 of them were originally like brothers. But because gorgeous itinerant was too handsome, all the rumors in the outside world revolved around him. It seemed that it was because of this incident that Taoist Taotai and gorgeous itinerant had fallen out. Moreover, it seems that gorgeous itinerant's mistake, before he left the cultivation world, is also related to this matter." The lady was stupefied when she heard this story, and felt like her brain couldn't take it anymore. Because she really hadn't heard anything about that Taoist Taotai who stood shoulder to shoulder with gorgeous itinerant. She stared at the middle-aged man in front of her, and plucked up her courage to ask. "This subordinate is slow-witted. May I ask the lord, why are you so familiar with this matter?" The middle-aged man chuckled. "Because Taoist Taotai told me himself. He might have gotten fat, but Taoist Taotai is sure that even if this person turned into ashes, he would still recognize him." The lady. "Has the lord already recruited senior Taoist Taotai?" "I wouldn't dare say that. At most, we're partners, and we each take what we need." The middle-aged man waved his hand, then looked at the lady. "That's what I wanted to tell you this time." The lady. "What's the plan after this?" "From now on, our main target is this gorgeous itinerant hiding in number 60 high. The rumor is that he has an invincible killing weapon that even a true immortal would be intimidated by. If my MO Immortal Castle wants to rise in the future, we can only rely on it now." The lady nodded solemnly. "The lord is wise. This subordinate will definitely do my best to investigate this matter." "Very good." The middle-aged man nodded. "First, we can send some people to infiltrate this school and scout out the way for senior Taotai." The lady replied, "Yes." Speaking up to this point, the middle-aged man suddenly looked a little nostalgic. By the way, isn't one of the classes that this gorgeous itinerant is in charge of now grade 1? Class 3? The lady. "What's so special about grade 1 class 3? It's nothing. I just suddenly remembered that when I was in high school, I was also in class 3? The middle-aged man's gaze suddenly fell on the glass of milk on the table, and there were actually tears in his eyes. "My mom even gave me 2 cans of Wangzai milk." The lady. At the entrance of the Wang family's small villa, Wang Ming's personal car driver parked the Aiguanhai war chariot on the opposite side of the road. Ever since Wang Ming had been kidnapped by Jiang Luiying, the younger sister of the master of Shadow Stream, at number 59 high school, this personal car driver had never left Wang Ming's side whenever he went out, for fear that something would happen to him again. President Qi had personally found this driver for Wang Ming. His surname was Zhai, and his first name was Yin. It was said that he was very strong, but Wang Ming couldn't tell why. He just simply felt that this person was a little scary, and that his aura was always chilly. Wang Ming felt that this guy shouldn't be called Zhai Yin, but Haunted House. Seeing that Zhai Yin was about to pull out the key, Wang Ming immediately stopped him. "Hey, you can go back first today. I'll give you a break." Zhai Yin didn't turn his head, and only raised his head. His cold gaze was fixed on Wang Ming's face through the rearview mirror in the car, making Wang Ming tremble. Even his words were icy cold. "President Qi said that it's my duty to protect you." Wang Ming was a little speechless, because when it came to safety, with Wang Ling around, he didn't have to worry at all. Furthermore, the most important thing was that he was wearing long johns today. Wang Ming pursed his lips and looked at him. "But this small villa is full of our family members. Isn't it a little inappropriate for you to get involved?" "Zhai Yin, President Qi said that it's my duty to protect you." Wang Ming, "Then can you stay in the car?" "Zhai Yin, President Qi said that it's my duty to protect you." Wang Ming was helpless, and in the end could only get out of the car with this old driver. Zhai Yin's face was expressionless as he followed closely behind Wang Ming. Wang Ming measured the distance between them with his eyes, and when he realized that the distance between them couldn't be more than 1.5 meters, he instantly felt a deep despair in his heart. After ringing the doorbell, the old man and Mother Wang were busy in the kitchen and didn't hear it. So Wang Ling opened the door himself. As soon as he opened the door, Wang Ling sensed an icy aura from the person behind Wang Ming and felt the temperature on his face drop. Without another word, Wang Ling directly reached out and pulled Wang Ming into the room, then slammed the door shut with a bang. His hand was so fast that Zhai Yin couldn't react at all. Chapter 313. The truth was that when Zhai Yin's car had pulled up to Wang Ling's doorstep, he had already heard what was going on outside, including the conversation between the two of them in the car. Wang Ling had heard it all clearly. At first, Wang Ling had thought it was a little funny to see Wang Ming's bitter expression, but when he saw Zhai Yin's unforgiving attitude, it was impossible to say that he didn't care at all. In any case, Wang Ming was family. It felt weird for an outsider to sneak in without an invitation. Wang Ling perfectly followed Father Wang in this. He was only willing to be a little more friendly with people he was familiar with. If it had been Mother Wang or the old man, they would definitely have pulled Zhai Yin in without a second thought. Thus, before Mother Wang and the old man noticed, Wang Ling had pulled Wang Ming in and slammed the door in Zhai Yin's face. How could an outsider be allowed to join in on such a joyous family occasion? Although he was a little unhappy in his heart, this was the task President Qi had assigned to Zhai Yin to protect his dumbass brother's safety at his side. Wang Ling didn't make things too difficult for Zhai Yin, and just cast a small spell the moment he closed the door to turn the perimeter of the Wang family's small villa into a steel barrier. Even a true immortal might not be able to break in. After Wang Ling closed the door, Wang Ming breathed a huge sigh of relief in his heart. He hadn't been willing to leave the research institute for the last 2 days because of Zhai Yin's antics. He had been complaining in his heart that it would have been better if President Qi had given him a beautiful woman. Who would want to go out all day dragging a human block of ice behind them? Wang Ming touched his wrist, as if it was still warm from when Wang Ling had pulled him in earlier. Seeing Wang Ling let go with a cold expression on his face, the corners of Wang Ming's mouth curled up slightly. He felt that his chance to tease Wang Ling had come. Like a cat, he pounced on Wang Ling and hugged his arm, twisting his body in a rather showy manner as he patted Wang Ling's shoulder and pinched his throat, a faint blush on his face. "Damn you, you're so annoying." Not only did this voice make all the hair on Wang Ling's body tremble, even Loopy Toad's fur stood on end, as if it had been electrocuted. Wang Ling and Loopy Toad. "Damn it, he really is an idiot. Yo, little Ming, you're here?" Hearing the noise, Father Wang got up from the sofa and walked over. Seeing this, Wang Ming hurriedly let go and greeted him. "Hello, Uncle Wang." As he spoke, he stealthily squinted and could vaguely make out the bulging veins on Wang Ling's fist. He was instantly frightened. and thought that if Father Wang had been a little later, it was very likely that Wang Ling would have given him a full set of wisdom punch. "Come, little Ming, come in and sit." Father Wang put his arm around Wang Ming's shoulder and pulled him to the sofa, his face wreathed in smiles. He was truly happier than seeing his own son. "What would you like to drink?" Wang Ming sniffed and chuckled. "Drink the soup later. I can smell the fish soup of the star grouper." Father Wang smiled. "Your nose is almost as good as our loopy toads." Loopy toad. Father Wang took a sip of tea and turned his head to look at Wang Ming. "Have there been any new research results recently?" This wasn't a polite question, nor was it a greeting. Wang Ling had come to the profound conclusion that this was a question that Father Wang would ask Wang Ming every time he came to the Wang family. It was said that this could give Father Wang inspiration for writing. There is one." Wang Ming nodded. "Actually, a lot of things about the Research Institute were confidential and couldn't be said. So every time Wang Ming talked about his so-called research results, it was always his own private little inventions. In our biology lab, we have eyeballs left behind by soul formation cultivators for us to study. I recently came up with a new invention through this research, but it's still in the trial period." "What invention?" Father Wang was very curious, and next to him, Wang Ling also raised his eyebrows. "This is a long telescope based on the structure of the retina of soul formation cultivators. As long as you have this long telescope, you'll be able to see 1,000 li away, and you'll be able to see everything." Father Wang and Wang Ling both broke out in a sweat. Father Wang: "What if this thing is used by criminals? After this research, it will definitely be produced as needed. For example, every police station will be equipped with one to keep an eye on criminal suspects. How can we sell it on the market so that criminals have nowhere to hide?" "That's good." Father Wang nodded. That was because a while ago, there had been news about a kindergarten teacher who had abused a child, and then threatened to say that the teacher had a long telescope that could see everything clearly even if the child was at home. It was said that the child had been traumatized by this incident. When Father Wang had seen this news back then, he had secretly rejoiced in his heart that Wang Ling had been stronger since he was young. It was also fortunate that these kindergarten teachers who had abused the child had been lucky enough not to meet Wang Ling. Otherwise he would have already sent them to meet God. The three of them were chatting on the sofa when Father Wang's cell phone suddenly rang. Looking at the caller ID, he saw that it was Lai Meng Meng. Father Wang could only get up and go to the balcony to answer the call. Father Wang: "I'm going to take the call, you guys talk first." Seeing that Father Wang had left, Wang Ling was about to ask about the material of the heavenly material sword, but Wang Ming cut him off first. "Wang Ming, I can't explain the screenshot you sent me about the identification of the material in a short time. Let's go upstairs and talk about it in detail after dinner." Wang Ling pursed his lips and sighed in his heart. As Wang Ming said this, it just so happened that the evening news, which had aired earlier, was being broadcasted again. It was still about the extermination of Immortal Mansion. This was probably another major event since the old devil's arrest. This kind of major news would always be broadcasted on TV about 3 times, fully implementing the policy of saying important things 3 times. Wang Ling had already accompanied Father Wang to watch the entire news once, so he had a disinterested expression on his face. Wang Ming, on the other hand, was amused. TSK, the largest dark cultivation force in the history of Huaxiao Nation? The core gang was directly wiped out just like that. From what I heard in the news, although this Immortal Mansion seems to have a very complete structure and a large number of people, it doesn't seem like they've been wiped out before they could even pull off a big scoop. Wang Ming couldn't help sighing. Nowadays, these dark forces are really getting worse and worse. They can't even compare to the dark cooking world and cooking master boy, Wang Ling. When Wang Ming said this, the news just happened to show the scene of Cheng Yu being escorted out. He stared at Cheng Yu in the news for 3 seconds, then turned to Wang Ling. "You did it, didn't you?" Wang Ling instantly felt powerless to ridicule him. This look and this tone, it was just like Father Wang's. Chapter 314. After dinner, the two brothers went upstairs. With his back against Wang Ling's bed, Wang Ming jumped backward and rolled onto it. The corners of Wang Ling's mouth twitched as he looked at him with his hands on his hips, feeling a little helpless in his heart. Although his bed had its own bed immortal and pillow immortal, he was much more open to Wang Ming than grenade-throwing senior immortal. This guy had always slept in the same bed as Wang Ling since he was a kid, and now bed immortal and pillow immortal had already tacitly acknowledged him as their second master. There were times when Wang Ling was really afraid of the most shameless people, and Wang Ming was a perfect example of this. Not only was he an idiot, he was also quite shameless, and most importantly, he was completely unaware of it. Wang Ming sat cross-legged on the bed and looked at Wang Ling with an amused expression on his face. Do you know, Wang Ling? Wang Ming, I like it when you're angry and helpless like this. Wang Ling's face swiftly darkened. Wang Ming instantly cowered at this look, and he immediately cleared his throat. All right, I won't tease you anymore, let's be serious. He knew that Wang Ling's mood was now close to exploding, and if he continued teasing him, it was very likely that he would set a second record for being an academician of Huaxiu's Cultivation Academy of Science. Number 1. The youngest academician in Huaxiu's history. Number 2. The earliest academician to die in Huaxiu's history. Wang Ming was well aware that there were times when he had to stop teasing him. Wang Ming sat cross-legged on the bed and crossed his arms as he looked at Wang Ling. The screenshot of the appraisal report from before was probably an analysis of the materials used for a spirit sword. Right? I want to hear you tell me about the origin of that spirit sword. If this had happened before Immortal Mansion had been completely cleared out, there was no way Wang Ling would have told Wang Ming everything. He didn't want to directly implicate Wang Ming. Given Wang Ming's personality, if he knew about Immortal Mansion, there was an 80% chance that he would explore it. The cultivation circle was a little more complicated, and it was best not to get involved if possible. But now that Immortal Mansion had been cleaned out, it could be said that he had nothing to worry about. Furthermore, Zhai Yin was his bodyguard, so he felt that there shouldn't be any major problems. At this thought, Wang Ming spread out his spiritual senses to scout outside the villa. Zhai Yin was still standing at the entrance, and wasn't in the car. He just stood at the door in a military posture, and did not move at all. It could be said that he was quite well trained. Although this guy looked weird, Wang Ling didn't particularly dislike him. Wang Ling stretched out his index finger, and lightly tapped Wang Ming's forehead, and the memory of Immortal Mansion was instantly synchronized. Of course, Wang Ling erased the memory of him in women's clothing. If Wang Ming knew about this guy would definitely be happy for a year. Wang Ming clicked his tongue in wonder as data poured into his mind. It's so **** convenient to use this trick to cheat in exams. Which student doesn't know how to point somewhere? Mom doesn't have to worry about my studies anymore. Wang Ling laughed in his heart. In your dreams. In Wang Ling's view, when it came to exams, it was always better to rely on oneself than on others. Furthermore, in class, almost no one would ask Wang Ling to cheat. The level of the elite class was actually pretty much the same, and getting high marks in the group of heroes was the hardest part. Wang Ling's grades were always average, and his scores were never high or low, so no one in the class wanted to copy his answers at all. Just a while ago, Dopey Gua had even given him the title of Balanced Cult Master because of this. After Wang Ling's memories were transmitted, even Wang Ming, the strongest brain in the world, had to spend a full 5 minutes sorting out the entire memory. Although he already knew that Wang Ling was responsible for the destruction of Immortal Mansion, Wang Ming was still shocked when he learned about the entire incident. The core organization of such a large dark force had been completely wiped out in just one day. According to the main line of memory, Wang Ling had first deduced that Immortal Mansion had used the Spirit Vein and the Holy Ice Crystal Array under their feet to build a mirror space to conceal their stronghold. After that, he had blasted through the space wall and been summoned to the top of Yuntai Pavilion. In order to save Dharmaraja and the others, he had exposed his identity, used his spiritual pressure to directly wipe out all the female inner sect disciples, killed a female elder, killed the silver unicorn, and finally killed the master of a mortal mansion. Wang Ming was a little powerless to complain. The things that had happened on this Sunday were more than what other people experienced in a year. If this was a serious cultivation novel, a one-on-one duel between two cultivators could take several days and nights to write. But after learning the whole story, Wang Ming heaved a sigh of relief. If that's the case, then the production of this substance in this sword is just a coincidence. Wang Ling didn't understand and was a little puzzled. Because after looking at the screenshot of the appraisal report, I realized that there was a substance in it that had the same composition as the Dao Talisman seal I made for you. Furthermore, it's the key ingredient. It's the key substance in the Dao Talisman seal that suppresses your aura. Wang Ming looked up at Wang Ling and explained very seriously. When I first saw the appraisal report on the material of this sword, I thought that someone had already discovered the secret of this substance. But looking at the current outcome, it's probably just a coincidence. I'm guessing that the master of a mortal mansion himself doesn't know that this thing was mixed in when he was making the sword. Wang Ming couldn't help sighing. You don't know how difficult it is to refine this thing. Even with the most sophisticated equipment in our research institute, we can only refine a few micrograms of it every year. The master of a mortal mansion incorporated a lot of materials in the process of making the sword. If it's a coincidence, it's indeed possible to produce this substance. After Wang Ming's explanation, Wang Ling was instantly enlightened. He more or less knew why his great purification spell hadn't worked on Fang Xing. It was most likely because of the resistance produced by the trace amount of this substance that was restraining him. The reason why Fang Xing still hadn't woken up was also because of this strange thing wreaking havoc in his body. Currently, apart from me and you, there shouldn't be anyone else who knows about this thing's existence. At first, I thought the cat was out of the bag, and I was scared to death. Wang Ming heaved a deep sigh and directly fell back on the bed. This thing didn't have a scientific name? Wang Ling stared at him and couldn't help speaking telepathically. What scientific name? I discovered it in the first place. And I'm not going to make it public, so why would I need a scientific name? Wang Ming said. Wang Ling. But I gave it a name. Wang Ming chuckled. I called it the anti-Wang Ling substance. Wang Ling. This name could be said to be quite simple and crude, because the strange thing about this substance was that it only had a suppressive effect on him. So there was nothing wrong with giving it this name. The material of that sword contains this trace element, but it's a far cry from the amount in your Dao Talisman seal. This thing is very volatile, so you don't have to worry about it. The substance in your friend's body will dissolve on its own in 2 days, and he'll wake up. Saying this, Wang Ming suddenly sat up straight on the bed and stared at Wang Ling with a serious expression. But, Lingzi, have you noticed a problem? Wang Ling? I give you the Dao Talisman seal every year, and the suppressive effect actually weakens every year. Chapter 315. Wang Ming left at around 9 o'clock in the evening. He had thought at first that he would directly stay and interact with Wang Ling. But when he thought about how Jai Yin was still standing at the door, he gave up the idea. Although a strong and well-trained military cultivator like Jai Yin wouldn't get tired standing in a military posture for a few days, Wang Ming didn't really have the heart to make Jai Yin stand at the door all night because of him. Wang Ming didn't like Jai Yin very much. His style of doing things was completely dogmatic, which was very different from Wang Ming's flexible Academy of Science research policy. But no matter how much he disliked him, the other party was merely abiding by orders to protect him. When Wang Ming left the house, he saw Jai Yin staring at him coldly. When he saw that Wang Ming had left, Jai Yin put away his military posture and did a perfect 180-degree turn before he slowly walked toward the car and opened the door for Wang Ming. He stared at Wang Ming with the expression of a viper in the jungle staring at its prey. At that moment, Wang Ming suddenly thought of the good thing about Wang Ling's dead fish eyes. His expression was a little stiff, but at least he wasn't cold. I'll truthfully report what happened tonight to President Qi. I'll verify information on everyone in this villa one by one, and I'll focus on the person who pulled you in, Jiayin said as he looked at Wang Ming. He recalled the awkwardness from before. When Wang Ling had pulled Wang Ming in, he had moved so quickly that Wang Ming hadn't even been able to see Wang Ling's face clearly before Wang Ming had directly disappeared from his sight. Wang Ming looked at him a little angrily and stood outside the car, refusing to go in. That's my little brother. And my uncle, my auntie, and my grandfather. What are you thinking? Jiayin's face was cold. Even if it's second great uncle, it's no use. Business is business. The corner of Wang Ming's mouth twitched gloomily. Investigate, investigate. He knew that Wang Ling had the great shielding spell, so even if they found him, it would just be a mosaic. He really didn't know where on earth President Qi had found this freak. It was June 28th on Wednesday in the 10th week of the semester. When Wang Ling arrived at school in the morning, he heard news from two acquaintances. One of them was Tan Qian. The owner of the beef noodle shop was Boss Tan's younger brother, who had come to the villa to cause trouble before. Jinka had taught him a good lesson, and under grenade-throwing senior immortal and Boss Tan's earnest guidance, he had become a genuine snitch. It had to be said that Boss Tan indeed had great foresight. From the first moment he had seen Tan Qian, he had done everything possible to help Tan Qian extricate himself from the muddy waters of Immortal Mansion as quickly as possible. This time, Tan Qian was going to appear in court as a witness to testify against Immortal Mansion. Before that, Tan Qian had also sent a complete copy of Immortal Mansion's peripheral intelligence network to the various cultivation police stations. It was precisely because of this that the local police were able to quickly carry out operations to clear out the forces at the periphery of the immortal abode. The above gossip came from Grade 1, Class 3's Master of Dopey, Dopey Gua. During the morning self-study period, there was a hubbub of voices in the class. Almost all the discussions were about the Immortal Mansion. I heard that this witness's brother runs a noodle shop? Super Chin asked. Dopey Gua nodded solemnly. Yes, it's authentic Laut and pickled cabbage beef noodles. I have an uncle who went there to eat their noodles. The boss has a scarred face and looks unfathomable. Wang Ling. Then in addition to Tan Qian, the second person Wang Ling heard about was Tang Yuning. Back then, this vagabond singer, who couldn't even eat 3 meals a day, had quickly become famous because Wang Ling had given him a song. Come to think of it, Tang Yuning was also connected to the beef noodle shop's Boss Tan. Before Tang Yuning had made a name for himself, he had been a regular at Boss Tan's midnight dining hall. This Tang Yuning is really tragic. Speaking of this person, Dopey Gua put a wry smile on his face and put his hand to his forehead. What's going on? Dopey Gua. Previously, after his song Old Boys became popular, he tried to release several original singles. But it seems that they all stole the headlines. Wang Ling. When he released his second song, The Prison Break of the Master of Shadow Stream's younger sister stole the headlines. When he released his third song, The Master of Shadow Stream's younger sister was caught and stole the headlines. After that, Shadow Stream's core stronghold was destroyed, the old devil was arrested, and the old devil was interrogated live online. Speaking up to this point, Dopey Gua couldn't help but sigh. It was his birthday yesterday. Thousands of fans came to celebrate his birthday. I thought he would definitely make the headlines. But who knew that something like Immortal Mansion would happen? Wang Ling. While the class was in the middle of a heated discussion, Old Antique stepped into the classroom at that moment. He was a full 20 minutes earlier than usual, and even took up the morning self-study period. The monthly exam was just around the corner, and it was a very important one. It was a joint exam for multiple schools, and everyone would use the same exam paper to ensure that the students could accurately find their ranking in the entire district. It wasn't enough to be king in one's own district. Only by being king in the district, or even the whole city, could one be considered domineering. The teacher who prepared the joint exam papers this time is the district's history teacher, Teacher Ji Zhongkue. Old Antique raised his head, a rare look of seriousness on his face. When they heard this name, a lot of people in class couldn't help sucking in cold breaths. They were all too familiar with this name. because this was the most brutal and inhumane teacher and researcher in Payuan district. Every year, the freshmen in senior grade 1 could hear their seniors in senior grade 2 and senior grade 3 grumbling about this person. When Wang Ling had first started school, he had heard clan leader Yu in senior grade 3 mention rumors about this teacher. Of the 3,000 freshmen who had taken part in last year's 6th school joint exam, 90% had failed in the end. Even the best students in the elite class had achieved was only 70 points. So although the exact number of schools participating in this joint exam hadn't been officially confirmed, it was a challenge for both the students and the teacher to have such a brutal teacher prepare the exam papers. Because of this, Old Antique took advantage of the morning self-study period to enter the classroom early to announce the bad news. His expression was a little solemn, but he didn't lose his usual self-confidence. Teacher G might be brutal, but Old Antique was still very confident in his teaching. In last year's 6th school joint exam, the teacher in charge of the elite class hadn't been Old Antique, so the result had been very tragic. But this year it was a battle to turn things around. Old Antique cleared his throat and looked at everyone. I studied Teacher G's exam papers last night. Not only did his exam paper contain hard historical concepts, it also included a lot of extracurricular knowledge, as well as historical knowledge derived from recent hot topics. So it might be hard for a lot of people to accept, given the recent hotly debated Immortal Mansion incident. Now let me tell you about the gossip of the dark forces. Wang Ling. Chapter 316. The concept of dark cultivation forces had actually only been put forward in the last few decades and formed a clear dividing line with the light forces, which had clear qualifications to run schools. The light forces included both official and private cultivation schools, as well as various rogue cultivator sects which secular itinerant cultivators could freely choose from. To put it simply, the dark forces were blacklisted organizations which didn't have their qualifications recognized by the state, and which gathered rogue cultivators illegally to run schools for profit. It was like those black-hearted spicy strips workshops on the market that didn't have a food supervision certificate. Old Antique explained this historical concept from the dais. In everyone's eyes, the dark forces are a place where a bunch of vicious people gather. But you can't generalize. There are good and evil dark forces as well. There are even some 100-year-old sects which were blacklisted because their sect elders were in seclusion and couldn't apply for qualification certification in time. In recent years, a lot of dark cultivation forces have obtained qualification certification through formal channels. Everyone immediately understood. To put it bluntly, this was the difference between getting a certificate and not getting one. After all, the spirit energy information era was no longer the era when hundreds of schools of thought contended and immortals fought each other. Everything was governed by laws and regulations. If you wanted to survive in the modern cultivation world, you had to abide by the rules. Wang Ling deeply agreed with this point. The reason why he had decided to wipe out Immortal Mansion was because it didn't abide by the rules. Not only did it disturb his life, the most important thing was that it also seriously affected his studies. In this day and age, can you still let people do their homework in peace? But as Old Antique had said, the dark forces weren't a gathering place for crafty villains. There were some dark forces whose sect elders were in seclusion all year round. If they couldn't get a certificate right away, they would be directly blacklisted. Reliance High School was an example of what he was seeing. Everyone knew that the headmaster of Reliance High School, Patriarch Reliance, was a seclusion maniac. If it hadn't been for several elders of Reliance High School personally dragging this old sect leader out of seclusion back, then to get a certificate, the school would have been directly demolished. Speaking up to this point, Old Antique's eyes flashed slightly. Based on teacher Ji Zhongkui's previous research papers, I'm guessing that he'll definitely write about the history of the dark forces. This teacher doesn't like to test people on concepts, but just in case, I'll put together a chronology of all the famous dark forces in history for everyone to remember. Teacher, what are the famous dark forces in history? Someone couldn't help but stand up and raise his hand to ask. I was just about to say it. Don't worry. Old Antique waved his hand and motioned for the man to sit down. Next, I'll tell you about some of the most famous dark forces in history, which are likely to be teacher Ji Chungkue's test site this time. Hearing this, all the students in the class took out their notebooks. Seeing that Wang Ling wasn't moving, Dopigua hurriedly nudged him. What are you spacing out for? Hurry up and write it down. Wang Ling. For knowledge like this, as long as he had the heart to remember it, he would be able to remember it after listening to it once. So he didn't need a notebook at all. Of course, Master of Dopey's reminder was out of the goodness of his heart. Wang Ling swept his gaze over the class and realized that most of them had taken out their notebooks. So he could only take out his own and make a few symbolic notes. Otherwise, he would really look a little weird. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. Nowadays, it was hard to be a man, to be a top student who did everything possible to get the average grades in class. So sometimes, when he saw some people in class who slept and played games all day and were good at studying, maybe they really weren't studying behind the scenes, but purely because of their IQ, they had probably already occupied the high ground. Old Antique was the best at predicting test questions, and everyone in class had always firmly believed in this. He was a living human predictor. A few years ago, because Old Antique's predictions had been too accurate, the District Education Commission had inspected his work for half a year, suspecting that he had leaked test questions in the course of his teaching. However, as the #1 history teacher at number 60 high school, the Education Commission hadn't been able to find anything in the end in the face of hard power. With his hands clasped behind his back, Old Antique saw that everyone had taken out their notebooks, then cleared his throat and said, "After all, the famous dark forces in history should start with the Flying Talisman Gang." Back then, when this dark force first started, there was only one person, and he started by peddling fake talismans. He specifically picked relatives and friends to develop as agents and underlings. After selling 100 flying talismans, he could be promoted to a bronze agent, 1,000 to a silver agent, and 10,000 to a gold agent later on. The gang grew to more than 1 million people. And then, later, all the members of the gang were caught within 3 days. Because the talismans they sold were all fake, and they weren't particularly strong themselves, it didn't take much effort to clean them up. Then the Flying Talisman Gang was labeled as the Waste Talisman Gang, said Old Antique. Everyone. In terms of the scale of development, the Flying Talisman Gang has the largest number of members in the history of the dark forces. In terms of hard power, Immortal Mansion should currently be #1. But before Immortal Mansion appeared, there was another major dark force that had to attract attention. I wonder if any of you have heard of Cheongchi sect. When he said this, Old Antique's expression abruptly changed subtly, but it only took a split second for him to return to normal. Wang Ling took in this scene. This is a sect formed by a group of top gluttons. Anyone who joins the gang has to eat 50 jin of food in one go to pass. Everyone, Old Antique said unhurriedly. Back then, when Cheongchi sect was at its peak, its disciples spontaneously formed groups to develop local forces and look for local delicacies. They traveled all over the country to hunt spirit beasts and eat wild game. This directly led to the extinction of 17 kinds of spirit beasts. Holy shit! 17 kinds of spirit beasts were eaten alive? There were cries of surprise in the class. Even Wang Ling had an incredulous expression on his face. To be honest, the history of most of these dark forces was actually rather dark, and they actually weren't in the textbooks. If Old Antique hadn't mentioned it, Wang Ling wouldn't have known about such a strange thing. Now that he thought about it carefully, it was no wonder that silver unicorns hated humans to the bone. If they ran into a dark force like Cheongchi sect, just the thought of it was a pain in the ass. Since they were talking about Cheongchi sect, Old Antique naturally had to mention the sect leader, which was also something that teacher Ji Chongkue might want to test on. Chapter 317. Taoist Taoye's deeds had in fact been passed down in the cultivation circle of the older generation. However, Because Taoist Taotai was really too ugly, those who had seen his true face would feel sick just thinking about it, while those who had never seen his true face wouldn't even be able to eat after hearing a description. Hence, the name was taboo in the cultivation circle of the older generation, and people no longer mentioned it. Reputation was something that had to be passed down by word of mouth. Since no one mentioned it, it was only natural that people would forget about it. Thus, students of Wang Ling's age had no idea at all that such a person existed in history. "Teacher, how ugly on earth is Taoist Taotai?" Someone raised a hand to ask. Old Antique gave the class a general overview of Taoist Taotai, and in the end, everyone's focus was on his appearance. Everyone had seen ugly people before, but they were actually quite curious about how ugly they really were. In Old Antique's words, Taoist Taotai was so ugly that he looked like a Taotai and had a huge appetite, which was why other people had given him this nickname. However, Old Antique didn't mention a detailed description of Taoyu's appearance. Hearing the question, Old Antique frowned slightly and then smiled bitterly. "You guys, can you stop paying so much attention to other people's appearances? You should pay more attention to the beauty of their hearts." Furthermore, Taoist Taotai wasn't born ugly, but because he cultivated the wrong cultivation art. No matter how much plastic surgery or how much elixirs he uses, he'll revert to his original appearance in a quarter of an hour. Everyone suddenly understood why Taoist Taotai hadn't gone for plastic surgery. It turned out that he was so ugly that even plastic surgery couldn't save him. Of course, apart from being the head of Cheongqi sect, Taoist Taotai is also the person who established the international ranking list of killers, and is its guardian, said Old Antique. Isn't the legendary gorgeous itinerant the guardian? Dopey Guo was greatly astonished when he heard this, because this was completely different from what he had heard from his uncle. Old Antique had an enigmatic smile on his face. In fact, there are two ranking guardians. The gorgeous itinerant that classmate Hirogua mentioned is also one of them. Back then, gorgeous itinerant and Taoist Taotai had established the list's guardian envoys together. But not long after that, the two of them had fallen out and left the cultivation world, and Cheongqi sect had disbanded on the spot. Currently, the ranking protector of the killer list is managed by Killer Taoist, who is ranked first. Disband on the spot. The students could not help but twitch the corners of their mouths. Sure enough, in this world, only gluttons could come and go at one's beck and call. It was no wonder that there was no news related to Cheongqi sect on the internet. It turned out that this dark force was disbanded before it could be suppressed. What's the reason for the rupture? Someone asked curiously. Old Antique took a breath and said slowly, according to rumor, it was because gorgeous itinerant made a mistake during a mission. No one knew the exact reason. All we know is that after that, the two of them fell out and went their separate ways. Furthermore, Taoist Taotai swore that he would definitely look for gorgeous itinerant for an explanation. Everyone was a little disappointed at this answer. Even Old Antique didn't know about this. If he didn't know, then no matter how much they looked it up, no one would find out. But compared with the others, Feather Lin was very excited. Teacher, gorgeous itinerant, why is he called gorgeous itinerant? Is it because he's very perverted? Old Antique. It's clearly because he's too handsome, alright. Dopey Guo explained on Old Antique's behalf. Although he hadn't heard about Taoist Taoya's exploits from his uncle, he had heard about gorgeous itinerant. Dopey Guo. As far as I know, gorgeous itinerant is peerless in his generation. Anyone who sees his face will be stunned. He has the reputation of being the most handsome man in the cultivation world. Is he that handsome? The girls in the class were in an uproar. Take Senior Immortal Toya, the chief instructor of our military training last time, for example. If Senior Immortal Toya's looks were ranked in the top 20 in the cultivation circle, he would definitely be ranked in the top 10. But he definitely wouldn't be number 1. Gorgeous itinerant's beauty was publicly acknowledged in the cultivation circle back then. I remember there's a ranking on the internet, you can check it out. Dopey Guo said. My uncle told me that a female cultivator took one look at gorgeous itinerant, and because he was too handsome, her chi and blood directly flowed backward to the top of her head. I heard that she hasn't woken up to this day. Is it that bad? Old Antique smiled slightly. What classmate Gua said is true, I've also heard about it. Hearing this, Feather Lynn became more and more curious about Gorgeous Itinerant, and her heart itched like a little claw scratching at it. Ah, it would be great if I could see Gorgeous Itinerant with my own eyes. Perhaps everyone will have a chance to see him in the future. On the dais, Old Antique rubbed his belly and laughed. Teacher was also in his prime when he was young. As soon as he said this, the whole class sank into silence. Old Antique wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. Is there actually no one who agrees? This teacher is very hurt. After school that day, the 3 class representatives, Dopey Gua, Super Chun and Lotus Sun, got together and seemed to be discussing something. Wang Ling narrowed his eyes in their direction, and only then did he realize that there was a little peanut among them. Don't you think Old Antique looks a little strange today? Super Chun asked. That's right. Very strange. Dopey Gua folded his arms and stared at the others. In the past, Old Antique never cared too much about his appearance. After class this time, guess what I saw when I passed by the toilet? What did you see? Asked Lotus Sunday. I saw Old Antique actually looking at himself in the mirror in the toilet. Holy shit. There's such a thing? The others were stupefied. This indeed sounded a little strange, and even Wang Ling couldn't help but sigh in his heart when he heard it. Given Old Antique's normal behavior, if he had the time to look in the mirror, he would definitely save it to eat a few more packets of spicy strips. Everyone loves beauty, Lotus Sun sighed, and then said seriously, I also want to remind everyone that you'd better be careful after school this month. Why? Chapter 318. It was June 29th on Thursday in the 10th week of the semester. At 3 o'clock in the morning, something big happened on a night market street in Shanghai City. According to eyewitnesses, a student in a school uniform had been walking down the street like a zombie. Halfway down the street, his body had immediately burst into flames, and he had started to spit fire wildly in all directions. The roaring flames had engulfed the entire street, and the entire night market street had been burnt to a crisp. Even the zebra crossing on the ground had been directly roasted away. Thick smoke billowed all around, making it look like a scene out of a movie. People from the cultivation fire department had immediately set up a barrier to stop the fire from spreading, but by the time they had taken care of everything, it was already too late. The fire had been too terrifying, and there was no way to save the night market street. Fortunately, at 3 o'clock in the morning, almost all the merchants on the street had already closed up, and no one had been injured. In the entire incident, a total of 4 people had suffered minor burns and gas poisoning at the same time. It was reported that these 4 people had come out in the middle of the night to buy supper, and had been unjustly implicated. So the moral of this story was that you should sleep well in the middle of the night. Staying up late and eating supper was bad for your health. As for how the incident would be handled, a lot of people could actually guess. The mayor of this district would definitely be removed from office, and the Shanghai city government would have to bear the responsibility for the medical expenses of the other 4 people, as well as the losses suffered by the nearby merchants. In some sense, this incident was no less than a terrorist attack. As the instigator of this terrorist attack, the student who had spat fire had died. According to the eyewitness accounts of the 4 people who had bought supper, the student had been knocked out by a black shadow when he had spewed fire, and had been taken away along with him. Thus, this incident had become the new topic of discussion during the morning self-study period in class that morning. Super Chun frowned and crossed his arms with a solemn expression. I heard that this was the work of Shuego sect, the new dark force that has risen up recently. A lot of students who have been targeted by them have been forced to eat their products on their way home from school, and then lost contact with their families and schools. Someone suddenly thought of Fang Xing. Student Fang Xing from class 2 seems to have taken a week off. Could it have something to do with Shuego sect? Shuego sect only came out in the last 2 days, and student Fang Xing's parents personally called the school to explain the situation. That shouldn't be the reason. Little Peanut shook his head. He was very sure of this. When I handed in my homework 2 days ago, I heard Class 2's teacher in charge, Meng Kaming, and Teacher Pan talk about it in the office. There's no way it's wrong. Wang Ling couldn't help laughing in his heart. Given Fang Xing's ability, if this group of people targeted him, they definitely wouldn't have a good time. Fang Xing was now still recuperating on Immortal Toya's Chrysanthemum Island. Wang Ming had told him that he didn't have to pay special attention to that strange substance suppressing his strength. It would break down on its own in a few days, and Fang Xing would naturally wake up then. To be honest, Wang Ling had been wary of Fang Xing when he had first met him. After all, he hadn't been clear about Fang Xing's background at the time, and hadn't bothered to find out. After the Immortal Mansion incident this time, Wang Ling's biggest gain was that he had thoroughly understood Fang Xing's identity, which made him feel much more at ease. While they were thinking, Dopigwa suddenly changed the topic. Did you guys see the video that went out this morning? What? There's even a video? It seems a reckless friend filmed it. A student in a school uniform turned into a man on fire, and then spewed fire everywhere. Dopigwa answered truthfully. What kind of evil art does he cultivate? Is it possible that he's a criminal who deliberately disguised himself in a school uniform to cause a riot or something? Probably not. Dopigwa shook his head and said, I've seen the video. When this student spewed fire, he was still roaring, and looked like he had gone mad. Also, my uncle told me that the instant the student spewed fire, the temperature was over 10,000 degrees. Wang Ling frowned. An ordinary fireball from an expert at the peak late soul formation stage was already over 10,000 degrees. But if this person was really just a student, then this kind of temperature was a little too exaggerated. This reminded Wang Ling of Mo Immortal Castle's Mo Immortal Water incident. However, Wang Ling had bumped into Mo Immortal Castle's Mo Immortal Water incident while it was still in the experimental stage, and he had directly killed the whole plan in the cradle. The Shuego sect this time was similar to the mutation potion that Mo Immortal Castle had produced back then. The only difference was that most of the mutation potions that Mo Immortal Castle had produced back then had been failures. And this time, Shuego sect had obviously come prepared. For a Foundation establishment student to be able to create destructive power comparable to that of a soul formation cultivator in a short period of time, whether it was elixirs or potions, they had definitely been planning it for a long time. This was a conspiracy that had been plotted for a long time. Of course, there were some things that Wang Ling didn't understand. For example, the name of this new dark force. Of all things, it had to be called Shuego sect. Every time he muttered this name in his heart, Wang Ling felt like his time and life were being stolen bit by bit. It could be said that Shuego sect, a brand new dark cultivation force, was in the limelight. The Songhai city government had requested that all available police resources be mobilized to dismantle this dark force in the shortest possible time. But unfortunately, Shuego sect hadn't left behind any clues since the incident. It was really too difficult for the police to investigate a case with no clues at all. In the office of the General Administration of 100 schools in Songhai City, Ajwa scratched his head, feeling like his head was as big as 4 mountains. He still hadn't finished dealing with Immortal Mansion, and the interrogation of Master of Immortal Mansion, Chengyu, hadn't been completed. In the end, this Shuego sect had suddenly popped up. Moreover, the most annoying thing was that this dark force just had to pick on the students. Currently, 12 students from 7 different high schools had gone missing in Songhai City. The fire this morning had been caused by a missing grade 1 student from God Vision High School. If he didn't handle this matter properly, no matter how good his relationship with Secretary Dakong was, the higher-ups would definitely vent their anger on him. While he was frowning, his phone rang. Seeing that it was the deputy director's office, he immediately picked it up. How is it? Is there any new development? Reporting to the General Administration, based on the information we've gathered on the 12 missing students, we haven't found anything in common with them. Ajwa frowned. Is this a random crime? The deputy director. Not really. If I had to say, these students are pretty good looking. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.